apply for IDA or title programs, you should use that first. And then Act 89 second. So that means we're missing out on a lot of funding. Because right now, we just got data back from the state. And the data shows that in Pennsylvania, the folks that in non-public schools, and it's not just our Catholic schools, it's all non-public schools. Our folks in non-public schools are only participating in IDEA 0.02% across the whole state, 0.02%. The national average is 5 to 10%. So we're missing out on a lot of different opportunities. And I just want to make sure we get it right, that's all. If you could have more funding, if Act 89, you could use that for counseling and different things that they really need, even nursing services, that would be awesome. But it's not there right now because it's being used for other things. That's what this is for, and we have a great team to lead us through this. We have Tom, and then, I'm sorry, Julie. I keep on forgetting Julie's name.
That's okay.
We have Tom and Julie here from the ADAC group. They're going to walk us through what we should be doing, okay? And then there's still more questions that we have for PDE because their guidelines, they're out of date. They're not following the law either. They're saying that they can't come to your schools and give, programs to kids that qualify for services. They can. The law changed. So, but I don't want to get into that anymore. I'll let Tom and Julie get into that. That's what they're for. They're professionals, and go right ahead.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Sean.
Sure.
I'm going to try to use the microphone just so that you can hang on every word that I say, every syllable. All right. No, first of all, just thank you for being here. And before we begin, and thank you, Sean, for the introduction. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference. Sean has been a wonderful partner of all of yours, but also of ours as ADAC in terms of ensuring that IDA is working as it should here in Pennsylvania. And so I just want to commend Sean and the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference for taking such a proactive stance toward this and working with us and with all of you. We're going to get this right, and today's training is a first step toward getting that right. So without any further ado, this is about obviously Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, but we're going to be necessarily touching on today Act 89 because there's been a lot of conflation, as Sean suggested, that's caused some mass confusion. So we'll get into that in due course. But I just want to also recognize Catapult Learning, who's also been a partner of ours and perhaps is a partner of some of your schools. Catapult Learning is in charge, has in part sponsored these trainings that we've had here in Pennsylvania throughout. So thank you to Catapult, our other very valuable partner as well. By way of introduction more officially, why did my screen go black? By way of introduction more officially, my name is Tom Olson, and I am the CEO of ADAC. And ADAC is a company, a for-profit company that helps and works with private schools to really improve their teaching. So one of our main foci then is to work with private school faculties to help them to be able to teach and reach all students, irrespective of what their particular learning needs may be. But off of our company, we've formed ADAC Advocacy Foundation, which is the portion of our company that is doing the work that we're doing with you here today. We have a colleague, Ariella Hellman, who was supposed to have joined us this morning from Boston, but something came up, so she's not able to. But then my other colleague, who's here with me in person, Julie, I'll have her introduce herself to you as well.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Julie Cantillon. I serve as the Vice President for Academics and Advocacy at ADAC. I actually live in San Diego, California, so I flew out here last night. I am a Catholic school parent, and I actually have a young son who has an IEP because that's the way it works in California. He attends Catholic school, and he's receiving services through IDEA. So I'm very passionate about this federal program, and I feel like oftentimes we don't leverage the funding that's available to us to serve the needs of all students. Most recently, I served as the Associate Superintendent for the Diocese of San Diego. I was in that position for 9 years and worked with Catholic schools in leveraging IDEA funds and also ESSA funds, in addition to professional learning and some other tasks. So it's great to be with you all, and I'm excited for our day ahead.
We're having some real issues here today, technically. Now the screen's dead again. What I wanted to do was lead us in prayer. So we had a text prayer, so I'm just going to do it off the top of my head until we figure out what's going on.
He'll be here in a minute. I just texted him.
Great. Thank you. So let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Good and gracious Lord, we ask you to be with us this morning. We know that wherever two or three are gathered in your presence, there you also are. So Lord, we ask you to gather with us this morning in your name as we seek to form all of the students whose paths you put into our lives. We ask you, Lord, to help us as teachers and educators to help each and every one of our students to uncover fully their God-given potential. And so, Lord, we ask you to bless our conversation, our gathering today, and enable us to continue to fulfill the missions that all of us have dedicated our lives to as Catholic school leaders and teachers. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
And I just want to preface, I hope if there are any non-Christian folks here who may be representing non-Catholic or Christian schools. I just realized, I usually say, are there any non-Christians here before I begin my Christian prayer? I think I'm covered, right? So good. Okay, good. This all being said, what I'd like us to do now is talk a little bit about this thing was working. This is the thing that's very frustrating. That was not. So let me just give me 1 minute here to bring this up. I was going to go to an agenda slide, so as we're waiting for our technical person to come in, our agenda today will open up with a welcoming activity, which maybe we should start now, and that'll buy us some time as we try to figure out technically what's going on. So is that possible to do without
Sure, yes,
technology?
yes, okay. All right, so just going through the agenda again today, we're going to begin with a short welcoming activity. Then we're going to look at an overview of IDEA for private schools, followed by an overview of Pennsylvania Act 89. We'll have a break, and then we're going to go through what we call the 3 pillars of IDEA. And so we'll go through each of those for a little bit. We'll have lunch, and then we'll do a review game. So make sure you're paying attention because there are some fabulous prizes, if you can figure out what's in this bag. And finally, we'll do a review and some action planning, because what we want you to be able to leave here with is action steps. So what are you going to do next after you leave this training? So we want to make this very actionable. You'll also have resources available to you. So in a few minutes, we'll put up a QR code too with links to resources that you can access now and then after our presentation as well. Okay. Today's goals, if we could just go to the next slide. So today we would like you to enhance your understanding of IDEA and its applicability to private school students. We understand that based on the survey data, that some of you have a really solid understanding of how IDEA works or how it should work, and others of you indicated that you really aren't sure what this federal program is all about. You may be receiving some level of service at your school, but perhaps it's not clear through which source you're receiving those services. We'll also explore Pennsylvania Act 89 and consider its current impact. And as Sean said too, what we're doing in Pennsylvania is we're conducting a study, an IDEA study. So we did receive your survey data, but it's really going to be critical for us to receive information from you all as to how it's being implemented at your site. Because what we saw was a lot of different responses. We saw some that were getting robust services on site daily, 5 days a week sometimes, and we saw others who indicated that they weren't receiving anything. So we really need to get a good idea of what is really going on the ground in Pennsylvania. We're going to review data obtained from the recent IDEA survey. So thank you to all of you who completed it. We had 170 schools complete that, which is awesome. So what we're going to do is, throughout the presentation, you'll see slides that highlight what the responses are. So if you look at, think about how you responded to the survey, you'll see how your response compared to that of your colleagues. And finally, we're going to develop a plan for IDEA next steps at your school. So we do have a lot of work to do. We are just at the beginning of this IDEA study, and we're excited to dig in. But there are some actionable steps you can take right away. And so really what we want to build is a network of advocates on the ground to be able to advocate for our students. That's why we do what we do, because we are called to serve God's children, and the best way to do that is to ensure that as many students as possible have access to our Catholic schools. Okay, And just to frame our conversations too, we're going to begin with a welcoming activity. So we're going to have some prompts on the next slide. And what we'd like you to do is jot down some notes, and you're going to then reflect on one of the three prompts. Then I'm going to play some music. It's called Mix and Mingle. So you're going to walk around a little bit. When the music stops, I'd like you to stop and share your reflection with your partner. So when the music stops, you'll say, "Hi, I responded to prompt number 2. Tell me about, here's my response. What is your response?" I might ask a question, and then I'll play the music again. What I've learned on this trip is Tom and I have very different choices in music and very different tastes. So we're going to go with, I think, my song selection for this, because I'm not sure if I can access his favorite songs on my phone. So I have a little speaker here, so we'll begin that task. So just take about 2 minutes to stop and jot, reflect on one of the three prompts, and then when you hear the music, if you can get up, mingle, and then find a partner to start chatting with. I mentioned, but my kids are 6 and 4, so my song library is very diverse. So never mind if something comes on that is meant for preschoolers. Okay, so let's start mingling.
I'm not gonna see it yet. How are you? Nice to meet you. My name's I've enjoyed my couple of visits to we were there for the beautiful job. And we were I turned around and she was literally on the floor mopping something up that had spilled. And I went, I've never felt such sisterhood. I get it. Oh, you're the superintendent. I do. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so my niece is in first grade. Kelsey has two. Yeah. Orange. Orange. Oh, and what's her last name? I think it's Snow. Yeah, it's nice to meet you. Which is about to be that's just the idea. I love that area. They're great. So much more, and the expectations.
Okay, we'll get started in 5 seconds. All right, what I love about that activity, what I love that you all did here, I heard so many nice to meet you. So hopefully you were able to connect with 1 or 2 new people in the room. And I'd love to see, did anyone show of hands, did anyone learn about a new tool or resource to support the needs of all learners in their conversations? So raise your hand if you got a new tool or new resource. Raise your hand, and this is what I heard most of. Raise your hand if you heard about a student who achieved success. Very good, awesome. I love that. Okay, and that's really what we're here to do, right? We're here to ensure that more students can achieve success through leveraging federal programs. And we understand too that we have sources of funding that allow us to purchase instructional materials, resources, computer adaptive technology too. So there's a place for that, but what we also want to see is we want to see students who have that service to be able to meet their specific needs so they can achieve at high levels. All right, so thank you for taking the time to do that, and hopefully it sets your intention for today, which is again to meet the needs of as many students as we possibly can in our Catholic schools. All right, next slide, please. Here we go. So, and then slide after this, I'm going to share a QR code and a bit.ly with you. And that will have the link to all of the resources from today. One of the resources in there is a note catcher, which you can make a copy of. It's a Google Doc or download as Word. But basically it can help you to organize your thoughts from today if you'd like to use it. You're also welcome to use just pen and paper, your laptop, however, Word document, however you want to take some notes. But what we did on this left-hand column is define some relevant terms. There's a lot of acronyms that are used in education in general, but also with federal programs, of course. So we want to make sure that when you come across a term that is unfamiliar to you, that you have an operational definition of it. Some key points, a present state, where are you now with this process, next steps, and then what changes might you make, and what questions do you have. So on the next slide, Tom is going to give you the QR code and the bit.ly to all the resources, and one of those resources is the note catcher. We'll be referencing the other resources later today, especially after lunch. So if you don't have a phone and aren't using the QR code, it's bit.ly / all caps IDEA-PA. Surprisingly, that one was available.
So now to get more to the substance of the matter, we want to start by just, again, setting forward the distinction that exists between IDEA on the one hand, the federal law, and this is the distinction, IDEA being a federal law, and of course Act 89 being a state law. And so again, our purpose for being with you here today is to really focus on IDEA, but necessarily disentangle from your experience of IDEA and your students' experience of IDEA from Act 89. We'll get into Act 89 in short order, and I'll be introducing to you actually Ariella Hellman, our colleague from Boston, who texted me to let me know she is able to come in. She was able to figure out technically what was going on. So she'll be coming in just a moment. You'll meet Ariella, who's an absolute expert when it comes to IDEA's child find. But before we get to that point, again, to set the context, and the context with regard to IDEA is that IDEA is the federal law, as I mentioned. It's surprising perhaps to some of us. I know it was surprising to me when I first found out that, but the federal government didn't really take an interest in IDEA until a year after Pennsylvania, being one of the first states in the nation actually, to really pass a law that was going to serve students with special needs in private schools. Act 89 became law in 1974, but in 1975, under the congressional authorization during the 4 years, the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act was passed. And that was the first law of its kind in the federal government that dealt with special education at the federal level for both public school kids and private school kids. Flash forward 15 years from 1975 to 1990, under George H.W. Bush's administration, Congress basically reauthorized that 1975 federal law into what we refer to today as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And then in 2004, IDEA was reauthorized. And I'll just mention that IDEA should have been reauthorized since 2004. Basically, reauthorization should occur every 5 years. That hasn't happened, and by the way, folks, given everything else that's going on politically in the country, we don't really expect Congress to take this up anytime soon. But the point being that as we prepare for that eventual reauthorization, whensoever it should come, we want to make sure we uncover the gremlins and the ghosts in the law, so as to be sure, as occurred back in 2004, the private school community can basically advocate for a better law for private school kids. But, as I have up here on the screen, IDA, we'll get into obviously all of this, IDA provides a variety of special needs support services to both students as well as teachers and leaders. And this law rests on the proper functioning, for private school kids at least, on what we have come to call 3 pillars. Those pillars are proportionate share, child find, and consultation. And clearly today we'll be unpacking those as we go. But just so you're aware, proportionate share, child find, and consultation is both a cause for the law working as it should, and also a reason that throughout Pennsylvania and indeed throughout the country, the law has not been working as it should. But we'll, again, spend more time on that as we go through this presentation, to talk to you about, to train you on how the law is supposed to work vis-a-vis proportionate share, vis-a-vis child find, and vis-a-vis consultation. Some key distinctions now between, for IDA, when it comes to public school versus private school kids. So public school kids, and this was a term that you saw in that worksheet that Julie passed out just now, virtually speaking, of course. Private school kids are not entitled to FAPE. FAPE is an acronym, another acronym, Free and Appropriate Public Education. Only public school kids are entitled to FAPE. And as a result of that entitlement to FAPE, public school kids have to IDA an individual entitlement. That means that Johnny or Sally who go to public school are going to basically get everything that they need to ensure that their special needs are being addressed. But on the private school side, the Catholic school side, it is not an individual entitlement. It is a group entitlement. And again, we'll talk more about this as we unpack proportionate share in particular, but just know that your individual students, qua individual students, do not have an individual entitlement to these services under IDA. Public school kids do. And that's why, by the way, these pillars are so important. Consultation has to be happening because we realize that the only way to ensure that these kids, this group of children in private schools is getting what is theirs, is to ensure that these pillars of IDA, again, child find, proportionate share, and consultation are working as they should. And that is really, as we've already mentioned, a large purpose of today's conversation. I'll this time turn the mic over to Julie to talk a little bit more about comparatively the differences between all of these various portions of federal law.
Thanks, Tom. So Tom mentioned at the beginning that oftentimes these are conflated. These federal programs are conflated. And additionally, you have that added layer of a state law, leading to further confusion. So we just wanted to clarify the difference between Title I, Section 504, and IDEA. Just a very brief summary of each program. Because what we find actually, even in our survey data, is when participants are responding, sometimes we find out when we ask about IDEA, they're really responding to Title I, or they're responding to 504. So we want to make sure to understand these distinctions, because when you understand them, you are better able to advocate for your students. So Title I, it's part of ESSA. Okay, so you have federal programs that you participate in, Title I, Title II, Title III, and most likely Title IV. And this program is meant to serve the economically disadvantaged. So if you have students in your school who reside in the zip codes, or depending on how that formula is calculated, those students, if they have an academic need, would receive those Title I services. Can you just show a hand if you have any students at your school who receive Title I services that you know of? Okay, so the majority of you. All right, then we move on to Section 504. And one of the things I was actually talking with Sean about this morning too, is oftentimes as Catholic schools we use terminology that's specific to public schools, but when we use it, it takes on a different meaning. So the majority of our schools are not direct recipients of federal funds. You receive services, not funding. So Section 504 only applies if you're a direct recipient of federal funds. If you receive a check from the government, or if you, that's why we never want to take checks, you only take services, or if you participate, in some cases if you participate in the free and reduced lunch program, the national program, that can maybe, depending, make you bound to Section 504. If you are calling anything 504 at your school, we strongly recommend changing that terminology. So when I was at the Diocese of San Diego, we just called it an accommodation plan, and not use that 504 plan, because you've got parents who know the terminology and can, hold you to it if you're calling it something that it's not. So just make sure of that. And then of course IDEA. And this requires the local education agency, or in your case the IUs in some cases, to provide FAPE and offer FAPE to students with disabilities. And as Tom mentioned too, the LEAs must spend a proportionate amount of IDEA funds on special education and related services. And you should know what this number is, what this proportionate share is. All right, and if we go to the next slide. We're just going to highlight two snapshots from some data. One of them is the Pennsylvania IDEA data overview. And just so you know too, I will download these slides and put them in that folder that was shared with you, so you'll have a copy of all of those. All right, so we went on the Pennsylvania Department of Ed. We learned how many elementary and secondary students are enrolled in private schools. The total private school students identified by the LEA IU as eligible for special education is just over 4,000, which is very low, as was mentioned earlier. And then the total private school students identified by the LEA IU receiving services is even much lower. So what you're beginning to see, hopefully, is that this number drives how much funding you get. So the lower the number, the less the funding. So we want to ensure that our number is accurate. And we're not trying to make the numbers look greater than they are. What we're trying to do is make them accurate. And we know, just as educators, this number is not accurate. So we know we serve a lot more students who are eligible for that. So according to this data, less than 2% of private school students are eligible, much lower than NCEA, as you know, just released their statistical report, and I believe it was 7.5%. And that was on the low end because a couple of the large dioceses did not report. And then less than 1% are receiving services through IDEA. So this potentially could be an additional source of funding for your students via direct services. All right, and the next slide. So this is a snapshot of the data results from you all, from your schools. So as I mentioned, we had 170 private schools respond to the survey. Total enrollment of the reported schools, self-reported, just under 47,000. So what you notice here, just take a minute and see what do you notice here and what do you wonder. So take a minute and then share with a partner what you notice about the data. How does it compare to what you saw on the slide previous to this? And what do you wonder? So talk to a partner.
We brought in one kid that really fits in there, this will be really have like 5 kids. We kind of want to do the next level.
Okay, so one of your noticing might be, it appears that more participants who completed the survey are identifying a higher number of students, or a higher percentage of students receiving IDEA services. Another thing you might have noticed is that we had about 2,500 identified by the LEA IU and 2,600 identified privately. Why does that matter? These students don't generate any funding. So when they're identified privately, no funding comes along with that. So that matters. So what we did in San Diego is anyone who had a private eval, we really tried to work with the families to encourage them to go the public route, because that came with dollars that could then serve the greater amount of children. So percentage of students privately identified for intervention services, 5.6% of all students. So you can see here, there's a discrepancy between the two data sources. and you can wonder what that might be, what that's attributed to. But something we do know is that we have a large number of privately identified students who therefore could be an opportunity again for additional funding and additional services. Okay.
And in just a moment, we're going to queue up Ariella and bring her in. But I just want to base set again. Our purpose is here today is to first of all give you information about and talk with you about and train you on how IDA, the federal law, is supposed to work. But as I said, necessarily here in Pennsylvania, Act 89 has been influential in terms of how well or not well IDA has been working. And so we're necessarily going to also be dealing with Act 89. And I just want to mention that, okay, you may say, so what? All right, so the point being is that these are two sources of services for your students and for your school, right? And we want to make sure that you're maximizing both. And with regard to Act 89, ADAC, along with the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference, are looking at this session, and indeed the other sessions that we're doing throughout the state of Pennsylvania, as information gathering sessions. By asking you questions, this is why we're trying to be dialogic with you, to ask questions. We really want to get some data from you specifically about what's happening with Act 89, because as we gather this data, anecdotal and otherwise, we'll be better prepared with Sean and the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference to have a conversation with the state, to have the state disentangle what needs disentangling. The fact of the matter is, though, that neither one of these laws are working as they should, and our goal here with you today is to train you on how they should work, but also, in the short-term future, hopefully, begin to influence changes, certainly at least among how Act 89 is being looked at here in Pennsylvania. And that is a good segue into Act 89 here in Pennsylvania. Now, what I'm going to do is have Ariella come in. Ariella, if you speak, can you just say hello, everyone? Make sure we can hear you. Okay, we can't hear you. So let's see what's. I'm going to play to Saint Isidore of Seville, who's the patron saint of technology, right? Yeah, you got that right. And we're going to pray to Saint Isidore of brings us in. But let's see if we can.
Here she is.
Do you see her?
I see her.
All right. And the problem is, I want to make sure she sees this. We see the slideshow. That's the issue. So. We have our IT guy coming in. Ariel, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Perfect. Voice out of the sky. Good. Ariel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your picture down so we can go to the PowerPoint as we're going through this, all right? And just say next slide, please. So we're at the first slide of the Act 89 slide deck, all right?
Tom, I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now, Ariel? All right.
I'll text her.
Can you still hear me?
We can hear you, yes. Yes, we can.
Okay.
So just start with your slide, all right? Of course, I'm talking to her.
I think she can.
Can you hear me, Ariel?
Tom, are you going to put up the slides on your end? Or
I will.
I have
Yes.
a copy of the slides too.
Yes.
So I can.
Go for it.
I'll use my copy.
Yeah, you could use yours.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. So
Show
I'm
the
gonna
screen.
look at my copy of the slides. I can't hear you. Hopefully you can hear me. And it's great to be here with all of you this morning. My name is Ariella Hellman. I'll just introduce myself quickly. My name is Ariella Hellman, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Advocacy and Public Policy at ADAC. And just wanted to share with you briefly a little bit about Pennsylvania Act 89. And I'll preface these statements by saying that I think that Act 89 is a tremendous opportunity for all of the private schools in Pennsylvania. And what we'd really like to see coming out of this presentation, and I should say coming out of our engagement with all of you, is to see both Pennsylvania Act 89 and IDEA working in a very functional way so that your students have the benefit of not only federal funding offered under IDEA, but also state funding offered under Act 89. And judging just based on the data that we received, it looks like Act 89 is actually functioning very nicely. Maybe there are some bumps in the road that we're happy to hear from you. but it looks like IDEA could really be functioning a lot more optimally in Pennsylvania. And so that's the bulk of our presentation today, is going to be focused on IDEA. But at the same time, of course, the federal law does not exist in a vacuum, and it interacts directly with the state law. And that's why it's really important that we understand what the state law does, what it doesn't do, and the way that it's being interpreted in the fields. So let's just jump right in to the slide. So Pennsylvania's Act 89 was established in 1974, right? So this is really a precursor to the IDEA Equitable Services requirements. So when we look at IDEA and we expect IDEA Equitable Services requirements for private schools to match up nicely with Pennsylvania Act 89, I think we really have to keep that in mind. That actually the state law existed before the federal law even came into place. So we have to understand that context here. Act 89 services are meant to be delivered by the intermediate units, the IUs, and they're meant to be supplemental services. These Act 89 services are legally distinct from special education services, right? So it's not special ed, but it's meant to be a supplemental service that can serve students. And this is meant to be a service that is secular, neutral, non-ideological, and are of benefit to all school children. I will also say to you, we'll cover this actually a little bit more in depth on the next slide, but notice here the term that these services are meant to be of benefit to all school children. Now, some IUs, are interpreting this and have a language to this effect on their websites, that special education services are, of course, distinct from Act 89, which we already established, that's clear, right? But what they want to say is special education cannot possibly be funded using Act 89 funding, because those services have to be of benefit to all school children, right? And we know from a legal perspective, the definition of special education is specially designed instruction, which means instruction that is specifically targeted towards the needs of a particular child with a disability, right? So specially designed instruction probably wouldn't fall into the same category as a service that's meant to benefit all school children. Now, I'll tell you the problem with that interpretation is, as we'll see on the next slide, which we're not quite ready to jump to, but we'll cover it here, is that Act 89 also very specifically lists all the services that can be provided using these state funds. And one of those services is services for exceptional students, which is further defined in the regs as special education, right? So how do we have both at the same time, right? How does the statute provide for, on one hand, special education services, and on the other hand, say, well, all these services have to benefit all school children? So we very much understand how this confusion, sort of crept in here, and why IUs may be making this interpretation. Some IUs, we'd love to hear from you and just have a conversation, which maybe Tom, you or Julie can facilitate, since I'm just not in the room. But we'd love to hear from you how it's actually working in practice. Is this an interpretation your IUs are sharing with you? Are they, if not, allowing you to use Act 89 to supplement the IDEA services, right? We really want to hear from you after we cover all the material on the Act 89 slides about how this is working in the field. And I'll say to you that this is a real opportunity for clarification from the Pennsylvania Department of Education as to what the law ought to be, right? What was the intent here? What was the legislative intent when this law was passed? And how do these two funding sources interplay with one another so that students can maximally benefit from both funding sources? Now, these services under Act 89 are going to be provided to non-public school students in grades K through 12 who are residents of Pennsylvania and whose tuition is not paid for by the state, which is also just a teeny bit different, right, than IDEA funds, which can be used to provide services even to preschool kids who are attending a preschool attached to an elementary or secondary school, and also would provide services for non-residents, right? If kids were crossing the border from another state and coming in to your school to get to, to go to school, they would be able to benefit from IDEA funding services. So there's some nuanced differences between these two funding sources. Next slide, please. There we go. Auxiliary services can include guidance services, counseling, testing, psychological services. Here's this third bullet, which is super important, services for exceptional children, right? So that's where it's hard to understand how the IUs are making this interpretation, that Act 89 cannot be used for special education, when the statute says very specifically, services for exceptional children. Remedial services, so that would be something like, remedial reading, remedial math, it's kind of like a supplement to Title I services, speech and hearing services, services for the improvement of educationally disadvantaged, such as but not limited to teaching English as a second language, it's kind of like a supplement to Title III, right? Other secular, neutral, non-ideological services of a supplemental and remedial nature as are a benefit to all school children are presently or hereafter provided for public school children of the Commonwealth. Right? So those are the kinds of services that can be provided. And Act 89 does come with, I'm jumping to the next slide now. Perfect. Act 89 does come with its own state funding stream, which is actually pretty robust. And therefore, services are going to be determined based on what is offered in the public school district. Now, for example, if the public school, this is not a realistic example because the public school would have to offer, for example, speech therapy services. But if the public school did not offer, for example, speech therapy services, or perhaps let's take a more realistic example, ABA therapy, right? So some public school districts do not offer that service. If ABA therapy is not offered by the public school, they do not have to offer that to students in the non-public school within that IU. Now, the needs of non-public school students have to be determined in consultation with the IU and non-public school staff, administrators, and parents, right? So we're not supposed to just, dictate to you what services they're going to provide, but really it's, the law calls for a consultation process where you can have meaningful input and dialogue regarding the services that are provided. It's also limited by the funding available from the state budget and the availability of staff, materials, and equipment. Okay, next slide, please. And then we can open up to more of a conversation on this. So, student evaluations under Act 89 versus IDEA. So under Act 89, the evaluation is not meant to determine if the student has a disability, but rather it's meant to determine what are the student's strengths and weaknesses in order to help the non-public school educate the student within the classroom, right? So it's really about more like remedial support, different services that can be provided within the non-public school setting. The Act 89 evaluation cannot be used for purposes of determining eligibility under IDEA, right? So if you went through an Act 89 evaluation, that would not make you eligible for IDEA. But that evaluation, any paperwork, any data that's generated through the Act 89 evaluation can be looked at as part of the data review process for determining eligibility. And third, and importantly, the cost of evaluation can be covered using Act 89 funds, which is not the case for IDEA. When an evaluation is done in order to determine eligibility under IDEA, we cannot charge that cost to the federal proportionate share funds. And of course, the evaluation under IDEA is used to determine both whether the student has a disability and two, whether as a result of that disability, the student requires special education services. So I think, what I'd like to do now, let's cover your data, and then I'd like to have a little bit of a conversation in terms of what's happening in the fields regarding Act 89. We want to learn from all of you as the experts here as we work to unravel this so that you can access really both of those funding streams, and this can be additive rather than just causing confusion. So let's do your data for Act 89, and then we'll come back to those questions. So Act 89 survey data, so we had 170 private school students who responded to the IDEA survey, and it looked like 8,034 students are receiving services under Act 89. They include speech and language, math, reading, counseling, evaluations, of course, we talked about that, that could be a cost, OT, mobility, tutoring, social work. And the majority of these schools said that the services are provided at your private school by a district staff member or a third party. Next slide, please. And when we asked specifically about consultation, 146 out of the 170 schools said that the LEA consults with them regarding the services. 15 schools said that the LEA does not consult with them. 9 schools just didn't know or skipped the question. 63 schools reported that the LEA shares the amount of funding available to provide auxiliary services, right? So that if they're gonna have a real robust consultation with you, you need to know how much funding is there available. 93 schools, so the majority of schools reported that the LEA does not share this information with them, and 14 schools did not know. Okay, next slide, please. Now here's where it gets really interesting, right? Regarding the evaluation process, right? 96 schools said that an Act 89 evaluation has triggered an IDEA evaluation for a child suspected of having a disability, right? This is really important because when we talk about child fines, the LEA's obligation under child fines is to proactively seek out and identify all students with disabilities in their district, whether they go to a public school, a private school, it doesn't matter, they've got to find those children. Now, if you did an Act 89 evaluation and the child was found eligible for speech therapy, let's say, or for occupational therapy, or for reading support, that should be enough in most cases to say, does this kid actually have a disability? Why does this kid need speech therapy? If the kid needs speech therapy because, you know, they have a little bit of a lisp, right? They're a young child and they're just learning how to pronounce letters, okay, maybe they you know, don't have a disability. But we should ask the question. It should lead to greater inquiry. So it looks like for most of them, they're saying that the Act 89 evaluation has, I guess, sometimes triggered IDEA evaluation. It's unclear how much of the time that's happening. 54 schools indicated that even when they go through the Act 89 evaluation, it does not necessarily trigger an IDEA evaluation, and 20 schools did not answer this question, right? So that's a little bit concerning data, right? Because we would think, you know, maybe the school, the parent is not that concerned about the child, but they think, hey, this kid needs a little bit of tutoring, they need a little bit of remedial support, so they go through the evaluation. But if that evaluation actually turns out that the kid does need more than just a little bit of support, and there is, you know, suspicion of a disability, we would expect to have a process where kids could be referred from the Act 89 evaluation to the IDEA evaluation process. I guess I also am wondering, right, do all kids need to go through the Act 89 process first before they even go through the IDEA process, right? So that's another question that I have, right? So if students are being asked to go through a totally separate testing process before they can even start the IDEA child fine determination, well, that's problematic because that adds a lot of time before a student with a disability can be identified and receive the services that they need to succeed. So, you know, I'm gonna pause here and maybe Tom and Julie can facilitate, but what I'd like to start with is, are you hearing from your LEAs that students who are receiving services under Act 89 are not eligible for IDEA services? We did see that on a couple of IU's websites, and we're curious how prevalent that is. Is that an interpretation that you were hearing in the field?
So how many of you have in fact heard that or are aware of that or have been told that by your respective LEA or IU? Ariel, I'll pose the question one more time for clarity's sake. Oh, she can't.
I can't hear you, Tom. I don't know.
Right.
I'll text her.
So the question was, how many of you have experienced your IU or your LEA telling you that if a child of yours in your school is evaluated via child fine for IDEA services, automatically de facto and de jure they're not eligible for anything under Article 89? How many of you have heard that? Okay, good. Because we in some of our research, we've seen that actually on some IU websites, which is problematic, to say the least. So none of you have heard that. Okay, Ariel, I think we can move on then. I'm hoping you can see what this
If
is.
someone's in Title I,
Tom, can you unmute?
Yes.
I can try, Ariella. Of course, I'm speaking to you like you can hear me. Let's see.
So Title I is a completely distinct program. It's part of.
Yeah,
Can you hear us now, Ariella?
yes, I can.
Okay, so perfect. We figured out this as well. Julie, yes, please.
Well, I was just someone, could you pose your question again?
So if someone's in Title I, can they receive the Act 89 services? Or vice versa, Act 89 receive Title I?
Okay, question
What
about.
about-
Not Title I. Right, not Title I.
Right.
Are you guys seeing that a student that goes through the IDEA identification process is told by the IU that they therefore cannot receive Act 89 services? That's the question.
Ariella, we've not had anybody say that they've experienced that, but we are aware that that is happening throughout Pennsylvania, correct?
We are, some IUs are posting that information on their website, but I'm glad to hear that it's more limited than what we might expect based on what's written online. I will say that the number of kids identified through IDEA is such a small number across the state that perhaps it just hasn't come up. I wonder about that.
We have a question.
I just have a question if it's more significant as trends across the state. Are there pockets? We're all in the same region. Is it more the Philadelphia side, the Harrisburg side? What does that look like in terms of the data?
Did you hear that question, Ariella?
In terms of the data regarding which IU.
Yeah, so there's portions of the state of Pennsylvania, for example, the Philadelphia area, perhaps the more rural, urban areas, where this confusion is being sown by the IUs themselves.
So we'd have to, I think this is really what's, what each IU, how each IU is interpreting it. I don't think this is something you necessarily see from the data, but for example, IU 13 has this on their website.
And we have IUs 7 and 8 here, I believe. So I know
So
IUs,
that's true.
and 1 too.
I'm in 28.
And 1 also, okay. The majority are in 7 and 8, but we also have 1, 2, and
28.
28 and 10. Great, okay.
So my next question, is there another question from the?
There was a question too about Title I, and again, we talked about how these are often conflated. Can a student receive Title I services in addition to Act 89 services?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, that's what we understand, very explicitly from Sean, that this was meant to be a supplement to Title I, because remember, IDEA Equitable Services did not even exist at the time this law came into effect. So that much is clear. Are people having trouble with that? Are people hearing from their IUs that they cannot get Act 89 services if they are getting Title I services?
People are saying, no, this has not been a challenge.
Great, fantastic. Okay. I guess my next question for the group would be, just looking at the data, it looks like there is a very, very small number of students going through the IDEA child find process. Are people finding that it's just easier to work through Act 89 and that's why the students aren't going through IDEA, or are there other barriers that we should be aware of?
Yeah, it'd be helpful if you could just think about why haven't more students at your site gone through this child find process through IDEA? If anyone wants to share, I can give you the mic.
I think a lot of it is with the IUs.
Okay.
Like, we have an IU and we had a new person.
Do you mind using this just so Ariel can hear? I apologize.
I think it depends on the person who's in charge at the IU. We have a new person at IU 7 for a number of years. That, he came in a few years ago. And he goes above and beyond trying to make sure that he gets every single child find that he can get. He goes to every one of our schools in his area and he talks to the principals and they look at the records, they do all of that to make sure that we get everything we're supposed to get.
Okay.
Now,
and-
Once a year.
when you say child find, you mean under IDEA or Act 89?
That's for child find. Act 89 is something totally different.
Okay, so when you're saying child find, you mean the IDEA evaluation process?
Yes.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? You could share.
Our IDEA evaluation has to go through our public school district, and our parents, for the most part, aren't interested in going through them.
Okay, is that common?
That's,
Parents aren't interested? Okay.
I think in our public school, they kind of don't want to pursue it if they know that the parents aren't going to transfer their kids to public school, so which means they don't want to take the time and resources to develop an IEP or even do the eval in the beginning.
Okay. So I'm hearing a lot of bingo, that the primary reason is that families don't feel that there's any sort of incentive to really go through the child find process. And I think that's really important why we're here, so we can actually share with them what that incentive could be too, and build our understanding about what services would be possible with more child find eligibilities. Ariella?
Right, I guess I would just ask, like, why do parents feel more comfortable going through the Act 89 evaluation as opposed to the Child Find evaluation? Can you speak to that anymore?
Because our Act 89 IU people are in our building, and they don't have to go outside to the public school district to get the eval.
Got it, so they're coming into your building to do the evaluation under Act 89. Now, it looks like, at least on the Pennsylvania Education Department's website, that the IU is also responsible for the equitable services provisions under IDEA. Is that what people are experiencing in the field, that you can also ask that at the same IU, where your school is located, to do the evaluation, or are you being asked to go through the LEA?
LEA.
Oh.
Is it the LEA of residents, or is it the LEA where the school is located?
Residents.
Really? Okay. All right, this is good. So IDEA specifically places the responsibility on the LEA where the private school is located, not the LEA of residents. And that's where some of this frustration may be coming in, is that the LEA of residents knows that you're not going to enroll your child. And basically, they're not going to be, required to provide FAPE. And it's actually a different LEA in some cases, the LEA where the private school is located, that would be responsible for providing equitable services under IDEA. And actually, it makes a lot of sense. The Pennsylvania Department of Education has guided LEAs that it actually is the IU, where the private school is located, that is responsible for all of the equitable services requirements under IDEA. So you should not be asked to go back to the LEA of residents to do an evaluation. It should be, at a minimum, the LEA where the private school is located, but really it should be the IU. And that will really help, because it will help synchronize both programs. Like if you've got to talk to one person about one particular program, and it's a totally different team and a totally different entity that you're dealing with on the other, that can lead to a whole lot of confusion. So perhaps that's an area for us to work on as we, work to iron out the differences between state and federal law here. Anything else that anyone wants to share about Act 89? Like, do you feel like it's working for you? Do you feel like kids are getting good services? Do you feel like there's not enough money?
Yes. Okay. Do you want to share that, Ariella?
Yeah, we had one person indicate, who was the yes over here on the effectiveness of Act 89?
People nodded their head, yes.
Yeah, could you just explain how and why?
We have meetings with our IUs, they ask us what we want as non-public groups, and we, rank what we want, and we get pretty much everything that we ask for. We have one IU that will limit some things of cost. I think it's mainly because they want to put their money into people rather than testing. So if this is your testing budget, they'll only give you this much, even though that helps more kids than some of the other stuff. But we have meetings once or twice a year, and we talk about those things, and we get what we ask for the most part.
And what do you mean by testing?
What do you mean by testing?
Standardized testing, yearly.
Got it.
Okay, so they pay for that?
We have one that'll pay for all of, well, two that'll pay for all of it. We have one IU that'll limit the amount each school can use. Cause it takes away from
Okay.
their people's budget.
So do you think at all, the fact that there is robust funding and robust services under the Pennsylvania law, under Act 89, makes it, sort of creates a disincentive for parents, right, which is, maybe they don't need it, to go through the IDA process because they're already getting what they need covered by state funding, which doesn't matter, right, as long as the kids get getting what they need, we don't really care who's paying for it, right, we just wanna make sure kids are getting what they need. Do we feel like the state law funding is enough to cover what all those kids need? Or are there additional needs that could be covered with another funding stream, or perhaps, the funds could be, diverted to other areas, for example, covering more standardized testing, covering just different areas?
Can always use more Act 89 money. It seems to be that's more flexible, that you can use it for more things, so, that's what the schools know more and they're better at, that and the Title I. But you can't, the Title I and the Act 89 have to work hand in hand. Because you have to, if you're gonna help your kids, like when I do it, my Title I, I ask for math and reading services, because if I just have one of those and Act 89 the other, then some students will go through the cracks. And so I don't want that, so I make Title I do both, I make Act 89 do both, so that we're catching every student, and not have, like, if a school district doesn't have anybody that generates funds, then somebody may not get reading services, which is a disservice if I don't have it in Act 89.
Okay. And is it the LEA that's running the Title I program?
I'm sorry?
Is the LEA running the Title I program? Or the IU?
The LEAs, I meet with the LEAs and we set up the program, and then they hire a third party to provide the services.
Okay, so there's not like a conversation between the LEA and the IU to make sure that it's really on the private schools to make sure that funds are stretched
Right.
to meet the needs of every
Right,
kid. Okay.
it's us working with, me working with the school districts, and then me with all the principals working with the IU.
Right. So I guess, in a perfect world, what would be really great is if we could have the federal funding cover services like speech therapy and occupational therapy, and more prevalent needs that really, we don't have enough Act 89 funding to meet. And then the Act 89 funds could be used to cover more of these remedial services and the testing and the guidance counseling, et cetera, right? So, potentially we could create even more robust programs. It's just that there's this barrier in terms of child find, which sounds like it's difficult on the parent side, but also the LEAs of residents are not making it very easy for families either.
The alternative Johnstown Diocese is a little bit different in reference to our Act 89 covers remedial reading, remedial math, and speech only out of IU 8. IU 10 has a little more leniency in what they cover up there. Our problem is we're very, very rural. So when we look at the IDA funds, we can't get quality organizations to cover those in our schools for like remedial math and reading. We've tried to get organizations who are coming in who have certified people and things of that sort. We're not finding that. So we tend to go toward the Act 89 side because we're guaranteed, certified teachers, certified reading specialists, things of that sort. And then we supplement with the IDA because we can't get the quality of educators to work that program because of the ruralness of our area. That's been an issue for us more than anything. IU 10 again a little bit different, we're up in the state college area, but IU 8 that's our biggest area. We can't find the right people to do the job.
The real issue. And that exists for both programs, IDA and Act 89.
Now, the Act 89 is great. The Act 89 is all certified professionals. We have no issues with that whatsoever. It's the IDAs where we have the issues with getting qualified people.
Okay, but, presumably they could contract with the same people.
The Act 89 people are hired directly by the IU. the IU does not want to do the title programs and such because the funding is not enough, because they are union-based and we can't afford to pay their salaries out of what we're getting from the Title I folks. So we only have one school in our diocese that has the IU doing the title program for them. All the rest they won't do because the funding isn't enough to cover their salaries.
We have the same
And Greensburg said we have the same problem.
Are other people finding that, or is this unique to this one IU?
Raise of hands, how many of you are finding that you're having access issues regarding Act 89 due to what the problem that was just laid out? Namely, IDA, I'm sorry, I meant to say IDA, meant based on lack of personnel to provide the service. Should I show of hands? How many is that an issue for? You're all the same, okay, well then it's an issue for all of you.
We do have one more question.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I need a mic, but you're bringing it. I had like a curveball kind of question. So I had a student so my school goes up to 6th grade. This, unfortunately, a student has a condition where her vision is deteriorating. So it was April, they asked for an evaluation. So I called the IU, they said they would do it, but we would have to pay, it was like $600. So we were talking about it, and I did hook her up with Bureau of OCR and all that stuff, so she can get that on the outside. But I think that will qualify under IDA. But then, so she went to 7th grade, our Catholic high school, which is in a different IU. And they said no as well, I think. I'm not sure, I didn't follow up on that one. So, I don't know, I just thought it was unique. And do you think the IU should pay for that evaluation? It was like $600.
You asked for an evaluation under IDEA, and the IU said they're gonna charge you for it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was for vision,
For
mobility.
vision, and did it impact the educational experience at the school?
Probably not, because she wasn't that far advanced yet.
Okay.
But they should have probably made that determination in the course of the evaluation. I've never heard that, of an LEA or an IU charging a family for an evaluation. Of course, they can under Act 89, using their Act 89 funds, but they can't charge the family. That's I've never heard of that before. But it does occur to me that, if we could get, the IUs providing both IDA evaluations and services, as well as Act 89, we could create much greater collaboration. Because I wonder, just going back to the previous question, if there's just not enough IDA funding, right, because families are not going through the process, because the services are not there, right, so it creates a chicken or egg situation. If it's the same party, if it's the IU that's responsible for both Act 89 and equitable services, which is again what the Pennsylvania Department of Education, says on their website and their guidance memos, then it would be much easier to coordinate and to have one large contract with a third party to deliver all of those services at once. So it really could help, in ironing out some of these difficulties. And IDA, by the way, does allow for evaluations to be done on site at private schools. It's not required, but it is allowed. It is allowable.
And I just wanted to jump in real quick. Folks, one thing, when we started talking about doing this study, what was brought up to me was that we have a lot of good relationships with IUs and your LEAs and PDE and everyone else. We don't want you to stop that. We need good relationships, because good relationships get you to the next level and get you through the door. I have good relationships with everyone, but I've also been told that I'm a little bigger in stature and that I'm bullheaded and that I don't take no for an answer. That's not true. I'll listen to everybody. But what like I said in the beginning of the presentation before we started, I want to make sure that our kids get the most services. I'm sure you do too. So that's all. That's what we're here for. So, but I just wanted to let you know that we're not here to fight with IUs or your LEAs. We're here just to try to bring something better that we haven't had before to our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to pick up on that point. I don't think we're asking school leaders, correct me if I'm wrong here, Sean, but I don't think we're asking school leaders to change anything for the consultation process for this year regarding Act 89. This is something that we're gonna address at the Department of Education level, in a very collaborative, respectful way, just to get guidance, right? Because if what's happening in the field is not, what is envisioned in the guidance, or perhaps they need to update their guidance, right? Then this is something that we can collaborate on. But from a place of relationship building, from a place of, continuing those strong relationships that all of you have built, and not from a place of, wanting to, break those relationships down or create any negativity. So I think we're asking school leaders to, just share with us, because you're the experts in terms of what's going on now, so we understand where the potential, issues are, so that we can then have those really collaborative conversations. And then we'll come back to you, but we're not asking you to change anything in terms of your ongoing relationships with your IUs or LEAs.
Thank you, Ariella.
Thank you. And just one quick example, in the Diocese of San Diego, as I mentioned, I helped to facilitate the process where we're able to receive direct services for our students in basically our inner city population within San Diego Unified. Prior to 2 years ago, there was 0 direct services through IDEA, nothing. And they had a lot of the same concerns you did, that parents aren't willing to do it, there's no real incentive to do it, it's complicated. But all of a sudden, when we started generating enough funding, when enough students were eligible, then we were able to provide direct services. And you can do that through the third party, as you know, but their students were able to get, 4 days a week of high dosage tutoring. So the intensity of the service can also increase with this funding. Because 4 days a week of high dosage tutoring is a lot different than once a week. It's going to make an impact, move the needle quicker. Another resource that they want to use is virtual counseling. So for schools that are rural, some of the third parties offer like a virtual counseling with a counselor that's available. So there are services that can be accessed that aren't necessarily requiring people to be on site. So just a consideration again to think about the value of IDEA and how to potentially support what you're doing through Act 89. All right, and we'll say thank you to Ariella. Thank you for your time, Ariella.
Hi everyone, great to be with you.
And you're going to be back for Child Find, I think, after our break. And we're going to introduce Jerry from Catapult, and then he's going to say a few words, and then we'll have a quick break. All right.
Hello, everyone. I'll make it really quick. I know that right before the break.
Sorry, Jerry.
No worries. No, I told them I'd make it quick. How many of you know about Catapult? Many of you know about Catapult? Excellent. So you're no events or a lot of the crews. My name is Jerry Chessman. I'm the Director of Operational Services, school partnerships for the Midwest, and also I cover the Mid-Atlantic. I'm going to pass some business cards around in case you need them or you need to contact me afterwards. Great to be in Johnstown. I have friends who graduated from here in the 70s and 80s from Michigan Court. I know a lot of your districts. I was assistant superintendent at the famous Woodland Hills School District in Pittsburgh for many years. I was a teacher there. Yeah, I'll take a mic. I'll just pass these on.
Want me to pass them out? You can talk. Okay.
So I was a teacher there at Woodland Hills. And then I was a principal, like many of you, an administrator. And as many of you know, Woodland Hills is inner city Pittsburgh. We bused many Catholic schools all throughout the area. I attended Central Catholic in Oakland as well, so I've been in the Catholic school system for many years. So that's a little bit about me. I have friends who also play for the Mill Rats right down the street from you guys, so a lot of roots here in western central Pennsylvania. So thank you. I'll make it quick. You know my history. Many of you know about Catapult, but we're going to go really quick here. Catapult, as you can go ahead and go through, it's the branch. There's 3 branches of Full Bloom. You have Catapult Learning, you have Specialized Education, and Little Leagues. Essentially, I'm going to focus on Catapult today. And Catapult it focuses on instruction, professional development services, coaching, all kinds of different aspects to help your most vulnerable needy students. We also have a branch called SESI, we call it, that's focused on special and alternative schools, and then an ABA program for very young students, typically pre-K and younger. So, go ahead. Told you I'm going to go quick. I know, it was right before break. So, Catapult, we've served over 150,000 students nationally, worked with a lot of Catholic schools. I think I saw many of you at NCEA last week in Pittsburgh. Were any of you there? I think I saw a couple of you. I recognize, yeah, it was a great time. We were there as well. We had some great sessions focused on IDEA and really converting EANS to title and other ways you can support your schools using a public-private partnership, essentially. We have over 40 years of experience. We have a really great diverse group of people. You have people like myself who attended Catholic school for 12 years, know most principals in the diocese throughout the further western IU3 area. And then also you have people that focused on professional development, coaching, intervention. All those experts really are part of our leadership team. Go ahead. Again, we look at Catapult and our services offered. It's a lot of different things. I'm sure many of you know about us and our different offerings, but essentially we look at the student and the school needs. What does the student need? We have resources for families. We have resources for your teaching staff. I'm sure all of you taught, or majority of you taught like I did. It's a tough environment out there. As an administrator right now, it's a tough environment. As an assistant superintendent or superintendent, it's tough. I think we average about 2.2 years as a superintendent. That's why I exited Woodland Hills and went to business, so I could really go ahead and share the story of Catapult and other things. And I think it's important when you think about us. We focus on social emotional learning. We have intervention programs I talked about to support some of your students in Altoona. I just drove through there. Used to do the old tour to Tune through Evansburg in that area. And you're 100% correct. You have some remote areas. People don't realize Pennsylvania is a T, and we have remote areas, and yet those students are typically very vulnerable and they have needs. And Catapult is famous for really working with districts, helping you to say, hey, look, Jerry, hey, Vince, many of you know Vince, we need help providing intervention to a small group. Can we do this? Well, yeah, maybe we'll put together customized programs to help support. Or maybe it's summer school. So that's our really student-centered approach. Go ahead. Sorry. This is an example. I think, Tom, we're gonna provide this probably in the QR code. It's an example of our IDA toolkit. And IDA is a great funding source. Again, we had, I think, 27.5% of our students at Woodland Hills had IEPs. And I was very generous to all the Catholic schools and private schools, intentionally. That relationship, I've heard it the whole time. I work with IU3 and then all the different Catholic schools. That's a critical thing, as Tom and everybody mentioned, because I was very generous with any district. I can't believe somebody would say you gotta pay a $600 fee for to help a kid. So anyway, I digress. So we have resources. This is an example of a template. I know Tom's gonna talk about the consultation process. We have many resources. I'm here to share resources with you and answer questions beyond this 5-10 minute presentation. How can we help? Again, I just mentioned it. We can help you maneuver the LEA process with Child Find. I know we're not really focused on IEPs, but the ISP consultation process is a resource. We have consultation and Child Find overviews. We're able to do professional development, again, for your teachers, maybe paraprofessionals that need additional training or asynchronous training. I actually, if you email me, I have a free 7-day trial of our professional development tool. It's asynchronous. Teachers can do it on their own, paraprofessionals. You can look at it, see your thoughts, and we can provide that as a more robust service. Last thing, counseling, speech and language, etc. We're really the one-stop shop to be a resource for you in this time of really, as we all know, it's a huge time in Catholic education. So thank you all. Please email me. Please reach out to our team. If you have any questions, yes.
That's not you.
That's not me. That's actually my name's Jerry Chessman. Again, you have my card. And you know Vince, I'm sure many of you have local teams, but please reach out. We've come up with a lot of innovative programs. They're supportive. We're here to be educators. We're all educators here. And thank you again for all your time. And take care. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Go Crimson, right? Good. Beautiful. Good job.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your partnership.
Oh, resources up here.
Yeah, just some examples, different things.
And what we have now is a 15-minute break, and we'll be back here in 15 minutes once we get the timer going. So please be back in 15.
Bronson Wilson, remember Rosen?
Thank you.
He's a fellow. He was there.
Oh, yeah, Stan the man. Stan the man. They were.
I know he had all that federal money down. I know that'll kind of try.
And I went through 6 superintendents.
Yeah. And then
I got out, I was there until 2016. I didn't get any. I worked at your old East. We built an academy there.
Yeah.
I helped build that with Dr. Callender, and then went to the top, and the work was great. It's been fun.
I used to say, of course, I was the senator.
Oh, you're Senator Valley.
And then I was at Army. So I retired. Now I'm retired. Now I'm retired. So I get my pension.
Oh, yeah, look at me, 10 years. 10 years, I think I got 13 in, but
We used to have a whole month. We used our district, but I think it's the wages are higher. And we're very happy.
which district are you in?
So the diocese of Greensboro, that's over Fort City.
Yeah, no, well,
It's like, it's about an hour east.
really well. It's just a lot of time. For you and I, it was kind of fun going back to when you were willing. You know.
I went there and I went to Senate the first day. I'm not sure. Okay, I got this.
I'll tell you what, I'm Jerry, by the way. Jack. We were losing. We lose about 8 kids a year.
Wow.
And I just said, you know what? It's gotten so wild that we could never really come up with a system that.
My kid, so she's going to, my youngest is going to school in Montreal.
Oh, yeah.
She shows me pictures of her high school. And, you know, it's international. Like, there's kids from all over the world. They're like, what's that? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
They're like, well, they're medal retention. Why? Like, they're incredulous that our schools need them, you know? But we have to have them. We have guards.
You did it in Seneca Valley.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
did on, and
Oh, yeah.
you were one of the first with Dr. Vitale. I was gonna, I tried property, I didn't get any more for the elementary.
Yeah, I would say, don't worry about
Yeah, well, I remember when I went there, 2000, those March of 2000, we had guards at the high school. Yeah, guards and metal detectors.
And you were there, you got out of it.
We had security.
It was
Yeah, it was great.
and they're down to
Yeah,
about.
we had, like, when we did that Saturday school, write your name down. I'm like, I don't get paid for anything extra. He goes, no, you get paid if you work at summer school. So it was great, and I think it worked because of all the money. You know, we had band night, we had a bus that picked up the kids.
I remember that bus.
Yeah, you know, and instruments. Money, yeah, Stan went out of that so bad, but I'm like, why?
I saw Stan, I think Stan just passed away. But
Weber passed away.
Weber passed away too.
Yeah, Leo passed away.
We all kind of went. George Novak went, I went,
Yeah.
Crone went.
He's the best teacher I've ever seen, man. You know, he's 13 kids that went to the NFL, and he never would yell at these kids. And I used to love that, you know, those kids from like Upper St. Clair would come walking in the state. Like, I just want to make it out with my life. You know?
Well, you know, me, I was in Central Catholic at the time, and that's when Woodland Hills was dominant.
Oh, yeah.
So I go from
You couldn't beat him in
Central-
October. Because he could have made him better.
Yeah. Go enjoy your break. Take care. Nice.
And we live in Woodland Hills. We're right off the pike, like, if you're heading more towards the shop, so right on the. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, right off of Marion. There once a week, I think, yeah.
No, I never read the board meetings.
That's good. All right, good.
Actually, I taught
Good up here.
Yeah, yeah. And then,
I had a great You'll probably see that walking around. Thank you.
Richland Westmont, all my kids are gone.
They still there.
I know, I just came on board late. Tony Mahoney, she's right? I saw you talking about that too, yeah. Tony Mahoney and her back camera. There's another person. She's also been.
And then they left then, is that STS, is that what you do now? Step by step. Oh, wait, we use now? Step by step?
We use on the, we use step by step.
Before it was.
That's just good. So probably in between.
Okay, hello everyone. I'd like to call us all back. So if everybody could please return to their seats. Thank you. Okay, we'd like to begin in 1 minute's time, please. Thank you. 1 minute's time.
Hi, Jared.
Thank you. Okay, so.
Take that a second, because we have the 504.
I just have something.
So that's more important.
Hey,
1 second.
so today I've heard inner city school twice. That's not really the term we use. It's urban schools. You know, I think when you say inner city schools, that conjures up, I don't know, I'd rather you said urban schools, so thanks.
I thought you were gonna do karaoke.
I don't sing
I thought
myself
he was
to
going
the
urban
cover chart.
California.
We're on Afghanistan, there's a couple kids that are of color, it's urban,
It's
it's an urban school.
Definitely a karaoke opportunity. You got the pipes, it'll be great. It'll be great, yeah. Okay, everyone, thank you for coming back. So, that break afforded us a good time to sort of take a breath, a step back, and allows us to now proceed. And we spent most of this morning, as we know, talking about Act 89, but now we're pivoting, and we're pivoting toward looking at specifically now IDEA. And I just want to reiterate one more time that IDEA
Oh, that's the timer on this.
That's the
It didn't display.
Perfect timing.
I'm gonna,
Yeah,
all right.
that was good timing.
Yeah, burger time. So again, Act 89 is state-funded resource, IDA a federal resource, and our goal again is to ensure that you as the school leader are fully accessing your students' equitable participation in both of these programs. But we're now moving, as I mentioned, to the federal law, to IDEA, and as I mentioned at the beginning, the proper functioning of IDEA for parentally placed private school students rests on these three pillars: child find, proportionate share, and consultation. We're going to take you through each of these. I just want to also just mention that at 11:30, we're having a hot lunch come in. So we're going to stop at 11:30. So we won't necessarily stop mid-sentence, but we may stop mid-slide. And so we'll resume after lunch, obviously. Just want to give you that as a heads up. So about a half an hour, then we'll break for lunch. But as I mentioned, proper functioning of IDA rests on these 3 pillars, and we'll take you through each of them right now. And we'll begin with our first pillar, child find. And I'll turn the mic back over to Julie.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Tom. Okay, and we refer to these as 3 pillars too, is because they all have to be working harmoniously in order for IDEA to be effective. And what we find sometimes, we'll go into states or areas or dioceses and see that all the LEAs that they're working with, there's a weak, usually if there's 1 weak pillar, the other 2 are also weak. You don't typically find just one area as a weakness. So what we try to do is try to ensure that the right questions are being asked during these meetings to ensure that all 3 pillars are working together. The first pillar is child find. And this is an affirmative responsibility of the LEA where the school is located. And that is indicated in the federal guidance, which we're going to review a little bit later on today. And they must locate, identify, and evaluate any child who is suspected of having a disability. And it's a low bar. It's suspicion of a disability. And per IDEA, really all you have to do is a parent would initiate the process, because for a parentally placed private school student, the parent always has to sign off on it. So technically the parent could do it without the school even knowing. Sometimes we have parents who do that because they're worried it might jeopardize the child's enrollment, and I know I had that happen several times. But in a perfect world, you would do it in collaboration with the school. So you'd be working hand in hand with the school would be able to share some of their data, some of their observations, and the parent would then work through the process with the LEA where the school is located. All right, but what we're hearing too is this may or may not be happening in some of your respective LEAs, IUs. So I'm wondering if a couple of you could just share your current experience with how Child Find is located, or how Child Find is working in terms of locating, identifying, and evaluating students who are suspected of having a disability. Yes.
Well, like I said, I had a student that they had started, the school district had started, so we live in, our building is one school district, but the child actually lived in a different school district. So the school district where the school is located started the evaluation and then stopped when they saw his address was a different school district.
Yes.
And so then the family had to go through where they lived, they had to start over.
Okay, and what I was sharing, thank you for sharing that. So that would be, again, a barrier for that family too, because now they're experiencing that frustration of having to restart the process. So what we shared is, technically the parent can ask for the evaluation from both LEAs. The district of location, because the purpose of that is for equitable services, right? Where the school is located, you're completing that evaluation for equitable services. The district of residence, why would they be assessing? What's the purpose of that evaluation? Yeah, to offer faith, thank you. So to offer faith would be why the district of residence would want to, why they would assess. So technically a parent could ask for evaluations in both districts. We don't recommend that because that's a lot of testing that might not be necessary for the student, but that is the parent's right. And sometimes the LEA where the school is located will invite the district of residence to the meetings and actually work together, so that way they can be on the same page. So again, these are things you can ask about, but it's important to just know what the law says, so that way you feel empowered to at least ask the questions. Okay, next slide. Okay, as I mentioned too, it's a low bar. Suspected of having a disability. And we know that the more data that we can provide, the better, because that will provide a more complete picture of the student's performance in school, their challenges, their strengths, their weaknesses. And here's some sample data that may indicate a child needs an evaluation. Can include one of the items below. It could be documentation of interventions, medical diagnoses, history of behavioral challenges. So it's not our job as educators, as you know, to diagnose anyone. And it's actually not the role of the child find process either. They're not diagnosing a student, they're determining eligibility of the student for special education services. So this would be different than a medical diagnosis, but a medical diagnosis can inform the evaluation process. So suppose a student has a medical diagnosis of ADHD, and and it's impairing their ability to function in school, and you're noticing some challenges, like the teacher's wondering, I've got some concerns, the child's not able to focus, compared to his or her grade level peers. That suspicion of a disability could then be a referral to IDEA through the child find process. So this alone would not generate any funding. It would only generate funding if they go through the child find process through IDEA. So, and as I mentioned, in San Diego, we had very low child find eligibility until they realized services could go along with that, and schools just their numbers just shot up, because then they realized, okay, the more students I identify, the more likely we're going to get more robust services, such as 4 days a week on site. So then they would explain that they had advocates at the school who would explain it to parents and families. Here are the benefits of going through your district, as opposed to doing private assessment. So these are all things you can share, and we'll go into a little bit of nuance with that too, because you're technically not required to do that at the initiation of a referral. Technically, it could just be a letter, or the parent could call the district and say they suspect a disability and they'd like their child evaluated under IDEA. Okay, next one. And there are 13 eligibility categories under IDEA. So if you take a look at them, and I'm sure you have many of these represented in your schools. Question we often get about ADHD would be under other health impairment. Might also be if the student has cancer or disordered eating. That could fall under other health impairment. But what we see typically is in our Catholic schools, about 80% would be under specific learning disability, and maybe another 15% speech and language, and then the rest would be other. That's typically what we see around the percentages. So yours may or may not look similar to that, but it's important to know that there are these 13 eligibility categories, and it doesn't need to necessarily be listed in order to be an eligible disability. For example, like I said, ADHD. Okay. And each state, so the federal regulations state a timeline for IDEA, but each state has a slightly different timeline that applies. So Pennsylvania's is actually, the first part, the initiation is fairly quick. Typically this is 30 days, but in Pennsylvania it's 10 calendar days. When a parent requests an evaluation orally, as I mentioned, it doesn't even need to be in writing, the LEA-IU must give them a permission to evaluate evaluation request form. If the request is written and the LEA-IU agrees to evaluate, they must provide a permission to evaluate form and a notice of recommended educational placement and prior written notice form to the parent. So there are specific forms that are written into Pennsylvania guidance that you could actually share with the IU when you're requesting that evaluation when the parent is, because this is written into their state law. The other thing is the district or the IU could deny the assessment, but they have to deny it in writing. So if a child, if a parent initiates the process and the district writes back, or the district says, no, we're not going to evaluate, we don't have enough evidence that there's a disability, then you could support the parent by saying, can you please give that to us in writing? What's the rationale? Because typically they're looking for some more indicators that there might be a disability, and that's something as a teacher that you could maybe provide, or as an educator you could provide. So it's important just to support your parent in the process, because most parents are really not going to know how to navigate that. Then the assessment. The assessment has to happen within 60 calendar days. So the parent signs off, and the assessment process begins. The school district or the IU must also present a copy of the evaluation report to the parent, and they must receive it prior to the IEP meeting, the eligibility meeting. And that is really important too, because if you've ever sat in those meetings, you know there's a lot of information coming at you. So it's important also for our parents to know that this is required to happen before the meeting. And the parent could request a delay in the meeting if they don't have it, because they just want to make sure that they're prepared. Another important thing, and I know this too as a parent, it's best, or I would recommend, not signing it right there and then on the spot, just taking some time with it, really thinking through and ensuring that you have time to process everything, and also having a chance to ask questions after the fact. Because as a parent, you're feeling a lot of pressure, it's very personal to you, so no matter how much information you have, it's harder to process when it's your own child. And then within 30 days after the evaluation, the LEA or IU determines that the child qualifies for special education, so they have 30 days to develop an IEP and offer FAPE if the private school is located in the student's district of residence. So suppose, this is going to be my limited Pennsylvania geography, I'm not even sure what town we're in, but there was something with Bell, are we in Bell? Johnstown, okay. Suppose your school is in Johnstown and your child resides in Johnstown, then Johnstown has to offer FAPE to that child's family. They have to do that. And some schools get a little nervous, some Catholic schools, thinking they're trying to pull our child away, they're trying to pull them to public school, but that is their federal requirement. They're required to offer free and appropriate public education. So it's important for you to know that, to be prepared for that meeting, to know that that's going to happen. Typically, our parents in Catholic schools decline that offer of FAPE. So the next step is then to write a services plan, an equitable participation services plan, if that child will be receiving services. How do you know if that child's receiving services? Because that should happen during consultation. You should determine which children are receiving services. And we'll go through that. All right, we'd like to know though, what has been your experience with the child find timeline? Has this been what you've experienced typically? Okay. Any deviance from that? Yes.
Question.
Yes.
If in the assessment they said, no, we don't want to go to the public school, does that mean there's no plan?
No, so that's,
So we get that.
okay.
We're not moving forward then.
Okay, so that might be one of the items we need to unpack at the state level, because technically, there should be a consultation agreement, what you agreed to when you consulted with the IU about what services your students who are eligible for special education will receive. So when I was Associate Superintendent in San Diego, we consulted and we determined specialized academic instruction in reading and math. So any student who was deemed eligible, who had a specific learning disability, which was 80% of our kids who were eligible, got that service. But suppose a student was eligible under speech and language, they wouldn't necessarily get a services plan because we're not offering that service in our private school.
But we get basically, if you're not coming to our school, then you're on your own.
That's great feedback. That's still task.
They won't do an IEP,
Okay.
they won't go any further.
And some of them are very robust in trying to get them to their schools.
That's excellent data, so definitely that's important for us to know too. Yes?
When I get that report, I always say to them, fine, don't give me an IEP, just give me recommendations. From that report, what then would you recommend? And I always get that.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Because that IEP, we went through their school, their curriculum, their thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But they stop dead right there, and they won't even go, there's no conversation beyond that, it ends. Now, like you said, in some cases, it's good because we need to write it to our school, not to their school.
And it should generate funding now that the child is eligible. So that's what we have to do too. We have to look at the numbers to determine, like, that student should be counted even though they're not receiving services. However, a services plan can also indicate the student goals. And the goals, when this works well, like it does now in some areas across the country, you co-construct the goals. They shouldn't just be the district's goals, you co-construct them. You have your teacher, you have the principal, whoever's there, and you determine the goals, and then your service provider provides services and to determine, whether, and they'll establish benchmarks to determine if that child's making progress towards those specific goals. Not, according to what I'm hearing, it's stopping right there. Yes?
So we just recently, within the last 2 weeks, had a student test. They came and tested after the 60 calendar days.
because they are now hiring through an agency for the school psychologist, because they don't have one there.
That's a huge issue.
So, that's an issue there.
Okay.
But then, once they were determined, specific learning disability, the parent said that she had no intention to pull the student from the school. So they wanted her there immediately, I think this was like Holy Thursday, to sign a waiver to dismiss the rest, and it was over. It was that way.
Yeah, no.
I mean, we were never called, like, I'm never invited to any meetings or anything.
Right, so, yeah, so this doesn't sound like it's functioning the way it's intended to function, and that's why we end up getting frustrated and we end up having a low count.
Yes.
Because, so you see how these barriers impact.
But, so can I list that student, like, on my child find next year? Because I don't have any, I mean, she was tested, we heard, you know, but the parent doesn't even have a report to give us a copy, you know what I mean? So they waive everything.
Did they put, they would have had to, they would have been required to put something in writing
Okay.
as to why they didn't, and I would still go back at this point and ask for them to put it in writing.
And then we can put that in her file.
Exactly.
To put on the
But
child.
then I would look at what's in writing, and then also request it again. So there's no saying if they declined it and you have additional evidence to support that there's suspicion of a disability, request it again.
Okay.
That's what I would do. I think they don't know, sometimes these things are so embedded in their just overall way of functioning that they don't question their process. And so what we're trying to say is like, let's just look at this process. Is it working as the way it's intended to?
The timeline's not working in this area either, but the reason they give us is we don't have a psychologist, and as Rhonda said, they're hiring out somebody in the Greensburg diocese to come in every now and again to do that, and she only does it in the evenings, like one day every couple weeks.
Okay.
So the psychologist, because of that timeline is just skewed. I don't know what it is.
Okay. And these items should all be discussed during consultation and also the concerns shared during consultation. And I'm not sure that you all have that opportunity to be able to talk through, you know, who is doing the assessment, where is it happening, when is it happening? Like, those are all consultation topics. And I'm going to give you a checklist later today that lists these topics. So that's something you can start with as well, so that way you know, that is supposed to be discussed. Yes?
That equitable participation is not the equitable participation from 89, you're not referring to that one.
Correct.
This is the IPA.
Correct. Correct.
And one comment, I'm sort of listening in over here what's going on. What you're seeing is when one of the pillars isn't functioning as it should.
Yeah.
In this case, consultation. We haven't even gotten to consultation yet. We're going to cover that after lunch. But one of the matters that should be discussed during consultation is how is the evaluative process supposed to be proceeding? And if consultation's not happening, right, this is where it's miscommunication, and it's compounding, and it's causing the whole cluster to fall down. We call them pillars, to use the historical image for a moment. Think of a Romanesque building with pillars on it. Think of IDA's proper functioning for private school kids as that building, and these pillars are essential. Well, if one of those pillars cracks or crumbles, the whole structure comes down. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, the case of the fact that you're not able to consult about child find is causing this whole house of cards to collapse, at least in terms of your students getting their equitable participation and not getting it. So that's an important point.
And folks, just to let you know, like I said, I have 3 children, all went through Catholic school, and there's actually 2 of them are still in high school. My youngest daughter went through this process through an IU, I don't want to name the name, but it's a very good IU, and we have a great relationship, but they didn't do the process the way they were supposed to for my youngest, and I told them this, and the only reason they ever gave me a report is because who I am and what I was threatening to go through if they didn't. So they gave me a report, but most of your parents, they're not in my role, they have no idea. They get told something, they say, okay, you're the professional, I believe you, and I walk away, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. They're not following the U.S. Department of Education, their regs or their guidelines, so that's what we also have to make sure too. Thanks.
Exactly, yes.
But I think it's better when the IU does it because they kind of keep it the same.
Right.
School districts, when they test, they've got a million other things to worry about, and if you're not coming to their school, why are they gonna bother is pretty much their attitude.
Well, they're required.
Well, I know.
Yeah, but we need to make sure they understand that that's a requirement
Right,
too.
but I think that's more the problem problem
Right.
than if it's the IU.
That helps, thank you.
Where are you will not test?
They won't
Go
get
back to the school
Okay,
I have a
so,
school district that refuses to test.
okay. So what would be helpful too, so something that I know that I work on with too, is I work closely with dioceses. And sometimes, my email address is on here and I'll make sure to share it again. They'll forward me communications and just ask, what does this mean? Or what, it's helpful for me to understand and for our team to understand what's going on the ground. So if you get an email or a correspondence that says, we're not gonna test, I'm just curious as to what the rationale is. And so if that's indicated, but if not, anytime that they decline something or deny something, I would ask for it in writing. That's the first step, is just ask for it in writing, and they know that, that's their responsibility, it's not jeopardizing any sort of relationship, they're supposed to provide it in writing. Because that makes them sometimes think about what they're going to put into writing, and check with people above them that they're putting the right thing into writing.
The answer is it's too expensive and we'll have to take it away from your other services.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
They'll say,
the
what do you want to decline,
only
what
way
services do
you
you want
have
to
to do
apply?
testing.
Wow, okay, and yeah, the assessment is not even supposed to come out of the equitable share for IDEA, the cost. So, that's an issue. Okay.
And there's argument, by the way. Ariella, who you met earlier, is an attorney as well. She's on our team, but she's also a trained attorney. And Ariella and others have suggested that child fine for private school kids is really, it's a civil right.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, we use that language, you're violating my civil rights, of course, you talk about, causing an implosion in the conversation, wait, end the conversation real quick, right? But, and I'm not suggesting you say to your IU, your LEA, you're violating our students' civil rights, that might set up a dynamic that you want to avoid at least initially, but hey, sometimes you have to, if they're giving you a lot of nonsense, you might have to use that language. The point being, every child who is suspected, even minusculely suspected of having a disability, has a right to be tested, to be evaluated for child find. And I don't care what the excuses are from your IU or your LEA, that's the reality. So they have to figure it out.
Well, then, I know this has nothing to do with what you're saying, but this is what we're dealing with. Parents who doesn't want, who's in our school that doesn't want their public school district to know their child might have a disability, so they would rather privately pay for the evaluation and the diagnosis. And
Right.
then we cannot submit that to child, our
No,
IUA
and
will
that's
not pay.
very common, and I know especially like as a Catholic school parent, I can understand why some families would feel that way. But what they have to see, we found, is some incentive. So if they know it's tied to some services, you're much more likely. But right now, it doesn't sound like it's directly tied to anything. It's trying to incentivize the process for families. And oftentimes, what we found in your survey results too, is they're actually disincentivizing you from going through the process. So that's a challenge. And so, like I said, we're going to continue. This is a long process, so we're just at the beginning phase of this work. So it's going to take some time, but we're going to work with you to support you through this process to ensure that students are receiving what they're entitled to under federal law. Okay. So what we find in many, many districts is there's a requirement for RTI. Remember on the previous slides how we shared, you could submit intervention data, you could submit computer adaptive software data, you could submit standardized testing data. Those might be initial requirements, the standardized testing you already have, or whatever you already have, student work samples you already have. But if the district comes back and says we need 6 to 10 weeks of RTI data, that's not allowable under the law either. And it's very specific in the guidance, like I said, we're gonna review this later today. But no, they cannot require that because it delays the process. So they cannot delay the process. So what they can do is they can start the evaluation process and then ask for some intervention data, but they can't say no, please do this after. And a lot of districts don't know that. Sometimes they'll put it in writing so they clearly don't know it and they say come back to us once you have that data. So again, they cannot do that. Has that ever happened to any of you where they've requested RTI data? It doesn't, I haven't heard that yet here. Okay, it happens in a lot of other states. All right, next slide. As part of this, we do have recommended practice for educators. You know, we're not just gonna intentionally hide data or not do something that's a best practice because they're asking us to do it. So what we have here, and again, this is all linked in your, the slide deck too will be linked in your Google folder, is a sample parent request for referral. But as a school partner, as you know, parents are the primary educators, but as the school, we can support the parents by providing, you know, some documentation that they might not have readily available. Some of this might be available, your LMS, or whatever, you know, might be easy for them, but other things might not be. Another thing I wanted to just clarify too is report cards. Sometimes Catholic educators too, you have families in your school, and perhaps you're modifying the curriculum, but you don't have necessarily that public school documentation to support that. You want to make sure that that was indicated on the form that you're submitting, you know, and talk to the parent about the rationale for that. Despite this not being allowable, it still happens all the time where we see, well, the student's getting all A's and B's, why would we bother to evaluate? But we know the number of interventions that are in place, the number of accommodations, and perhaps modifications the student is receiving. So it's important for that parent to have that support. Work samples, of course. And then only if you already have, and I'm not sure how robust if you have an RTI process, an MTSS process in your diocese or at your schools, but if you have a student study team, any of that documentation would support that referral. Because remember, they have to not just assess if the child has a disability, but is it impacting their ability to function during the academic day? Emotionally, academically, physically, however it may be, are they having trouble accessing the academic content of the day? So any of this would help support that. Another thing I wanted to share too is, do you have a process at your school to determine when you suspect a disability? What triggers that process? So if you have a student study team, anyone have something similar to a student study team? Okay, so if you know if a universal screener data indicates that urgent intervention is needed, that would be a suspicion of a disability if you're seeing that also in the classroom. So there's no need to delay. That's when you trigger that. So it's determining when at your site you're also triggering that referral. Did you have a question too?
I did have a question about what if school districts, and I think it's few and far between, what if they use RTI as an identification? So some districts, they use that and they don't test. They say, okay, we tried this, it didn't work, we tried this, it didn't work. Like, I'm not aware of anybody that does that because they make it so hard to do that for districts. So like, could they refuse on those grounds?
They can't, because it doesn't apply to private schools.
Okay.
Really explicit, and that quote we had from the guidance, that supports that, and I often will share that with a district, and they haven't seen it before. So
Yeah,
again,
I
that's
think-
that knowledge.
And I think the thing to keep in mind is, obviously as educators, RTI is educationally sound practice, obviously, right? And certainly, anything that you are doing or planning on doing, you should do. But can the LEA or the IU require RTI before engaging in child find? The answer is an unequivocal no. So don't, and as Julie said, here in Pennsylvania, that's not so much an issue. I know throughout the rest of the country it is.
It's a huge issue, actually.
Exactly.
Majority of districts.
Exactly, but that is not a requirement. Is it educationally good? Yes, but is it required for our IDA's child find process to begin? The answer is absolutely not.
Okay, we do have some data to look at, so maybe do the data and then
Yeah,
lunch?
we're gonna break for lunch in just a few moments, because it's hot, we don't want it to get cold, but I just wanna now unpack for you some of the data regarding child find that you provided. And we asked, does your local public school district or IU work with you to inform your parents about the availability of testing? Very interesting, isn't it? Just about 50% or so answered that in the negative. That's a problem. And the notable data point is precisely that 82 schools of 170 that we surveyed answered precisely that way, negatively. So that's just an FYI, and that means there's a problem here in Pennsylvania, obviously, with regard to how this is working. Next survey question. Does your LEA or IU require RTI? Now, we just said in Pennsylvania, this doesn't seem like it's much of an issue, except roughly a third of the respondents are actually saying that yes, they are requiring RTI. What's that all about? Shouldn't be happening, but it is, all right? Should not be happening, but it is. Next. Question 19. What percentage of your school students who have gone through your LEA's or IU's special education evaluation process have been found eligible? I want you to pay attention to this for a moment. This is, for me, a very remarkable data point. By the way, reflective of what we also see in other parts of the country. The notable data point is that 62 schools indicated that after the evaluation is conducted, the LEAs and the IUs are saying, oh, this kid doesn't have any problems. Here's the problem with that. Can we extrapolate that, comparatively speaking, to the public school system? That's number one. Now, we do know that nationally there is a trend because of the lack of funding in IDA generally, that some kids are being purposefully not found to be eligible both on the public and the private school side. But the reality is that this percentage of 50%, a negative result of an evaluation in terms of the positive question, does this child have a special need that could be served under IDA, is no. That's pretty darn high. And while we can't prove this, we're wondering whether in some places and in some cases there may be some bias against private school kids. I mean, you're shaking your head, so and I see others shaking their heads. We can't prove that, and to be clear, this is being recorded. I'm not claiming it, but you know that would require a lot of extra data for us to actually really drill down on. But it is notable that basically these districts are saying, you know, your parents and your teachers and your leader at your school, even though you think this kid has a disability, you know, we're telling you they really don't. I'm not so sure about that. And by the way, remember that in IDA you can re-request another evaluation for a child. Well, let's say a child's found to not need special ed related services. You can go back in the future and ask for that child to be tested again, if in fact there's evidence, notwithstanding RTI, that the child does in fact have a disability.
You also have a right to request an independent education evaluation.
Good point.
So
That's right.
that is a parent's right. However, I noticed on the Pennsylvania State website, it says that private school students aren't eligible for that, so that's something we're gonna have to clarify. But has anyone ever done that before? It's called an IEE. Okay, well, this is something that we say, when a student's determined not eligible by the public school, if they feel like the district did not test fully, or in the area of suspected disability, the parent has a right to request an independent education evaluation, IEE, paid for at the public's expense. So again, a lot of our families, they're putting all of any income they have that would be discretionary into our Catholic schools. This is a helpful support for families to know that IEE is a right that they have. And we're going to share that documentation with you in the guidance as well.
And I think at this time, I told you we're gonna be breaking kind of an awkward time, but hey, food's on the way, right? So Sean, is the food actually ready, or do we have a few more moments?
It's not here yet, okay.
Then we get a few more moments, which is great. So continue, let's continue, yeah.
Okay, so in Pennsylvania, they call this, so a student doesn't get an IEP if they stay in our private schools, our Catholic schools, but if we've consulted and we determined that they're going to get services through IDEA, they would get what's called in Pennsylvania an EP services plan. In other parts of the country, it's just called a services plan. So, following the consultation with private schools, notice that this is supposed to be happening, you agree upon what services your students will receive, the students who are eligible for IDEA. So in San Diego, we consulted and we said our students need reading and math, specialized academic instruction. We partnered with a third party who came in 4 days a week, and we worked that out. Took some time, but we worked it out. So now any student who's eligible who has a need for specialized academic instruction is receiving that service, because we have limited funding, so we put it to where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. A private school representative must be included in this meeting. That's important too. Is that happening? Okay. So when you get to the point of the services plan, a private school representative has to be there, and ideally you're co-constructing the goals, as we talked about. These aren't the public school goals, these are goals for this particular student who's staying in your private school. They should have a services plan, and it's to be written to the extent as similar as possible to the IEP. So this could really be a helpful document for schools. So in San Diego, I have their goals, we have all of their present levels, we have all of the data that would be included in the IEP, but it's meant for their enrollment in the private schools. And then if a student is found eligible for a service that is not provided, no services plan needs to be written. So at the very least, we need to ask the question, to think about what services are provided through IDEA. And if the district, what is the district saying to that question? Nothing, or we don't know, or, you know, like we need to be asking those questions. What service is provided? Because those are the students that would receive services plans. Anyone who's eligible for that service. All right. And just differences between the IEP and the EP services plan. So again, you get the public school, they have to offer FAPE. It must ensure they receive all of the services that the child is entitled to, and I know public schools have their issues too with staffing, with ensuring that this need is met, but that is their responsibility. It spells out the services, supports, and specialized instruction that the child will receive. And its IDEA is the federal law, and that the child must receive individualized services in order to provide FAPE, and it is not budget dependent. So in our private schools, we run out of funding, our services stop. So that proportionate share of funding, in public schools that can't happen, they continue. And the IEP must be reviewed at least once a year. The student's also reevaluated, the triennial, every 3 years. Note that that should also be happening with the services plan. So that student it's being reviewed annually, it's being or the triennial happens every 3 years, and that should be initiated by the district. They don't have an individual right to services, but you can say all of our students who qualify under specific learning disability are receiving blank, or who qualify under speech and language are receiving blank. And this could work really well with your other federal programs, because now you're meeting the kids who are eligible for special education, and those other monies can be used for their intended purposes. This is the section of the law. Again, we're going to review some of this that's specific to private schools. And this is saying that the services plan spells out what's going to be offered to the child. But they shouldn't be making the decision without consulting with the schools to determine what services are provided. And then it doesn't ensure that every child receives FAPE. So once they make the decision to stay in private schools, they don't have access to FAPE. It's an important knowledge piece for parents too, because sometimes parents will say, well, what's my child going to get? And it's important as an educator in private schools to try to explain to them that's not really how it works. You consult for services as a group, and then you prioritize the greatest needs at your school.
And again, I want to come back to the point we'll raise after lunch, which is consultation. If you look up here, these first two blocks, we're talking about proportionate share funding. We're talking about the services that will or will not be made available. Not only which services, but which kids will be served and by whom, a third party or somebody on, for example, the public school staff. All of these questions can only be asked if they're asked within the conversation. IDA is clear that that conversation is called consultation, which means consultation should be happening at least once a year, if not more often than that. And if consultation is not happening, which clearly in some cases it seems like here it's not, or at least not happening as much as it should, that's why we're seeing sort of a breakdown across the entire system. And this is a great segue to lunch, because I know lunch will be ready in just a couple minutes. To conclude, I think, and then we can break for lunch, a data point right from the surveys that you guys contributed to, question 20. Does your LEA or IU develop services plans for the eligible students who will receive IDA-funded services? And what's, again, really notable is that greater than half indicated that the LEA or the IU does not develop services plan for eligible students. That's a violation, folks. That's a violation of the law. And, I'll conclude simply by stating, Marvel Comics, I think, knowing is half the battle, right? I think in part this is about getting you folks up to the point where you have knowledge of the law, so you know how it's supposed to work, so that then locally we can ensure that it is working. At this time, it looks like we'll break for lunch. I'll lead us all into grace, and then, assuming the food is ready. Sean, is the food ready? I want to make sure I don't sick them on you before the food is out. Sean?
Yep.
Is the food ready?
Right after your prayer, are we done?
All right, great, good. Well, let us pray. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Good and gracious Lord, we thank you for this time that we spent together already, and we ask you to bless our food and our conversation as a harbinger of the heavenly feast to which you beckon us through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Enjoy lunch. I believe we have lunch for 45 minutes, which means we will resume at 12:20, to be really technical. 12. We'll just say 12:30. Does that work for everybody? 12:30. We'll resume at 12:30. All right. So enjoy your lunch, everyone. We'll see you back here at 12:30. Thank you so much.
Experience of consultation, or that would be an expression of your experience at consultation. So we'll just get a couple of songs, and then we're going to do a little singing as we come back. Okay, so raise your hand when you've got a song. Probably not Taylor Swift, so if you can avoid Taylor Swift. I've learned that Tom is not a huge fan of Taylor Swift.
She's okay.
He doesn't understand it. So, yeah. All right, any song that describes your experience of consultation. What I'm hearing is it's not happening in some places. I wonder if you can think of a song.
Shot in the dark.
Shot in the dark. All right, here we go. Shot in the dark. I don't know.
I'm not sure if I heard. Shot in the dark. Is that the one? Yeah. You get love, a bad name. Is that the one? Yeah.
All right, as we come back, let's sing Shot in the Dark. Yeah. Ozzy Osbourne? Oh, yes. Okay, so Father Tom does not know Ozzy Osbourne. So, anything from the American Songbook. I don't know what's in the American Songbook, but somebody here must.
So let me give you a genre sort of clue. I'm a big fan musically of, I can't believe I'm saying this publicly, but singers like Neil Diamond, Barry Manilow, Johnny Mathis. He's 88 years old. I have every one of his albums ever recorded since 1957. I've seen him in concert 7 times. So that's the kind of music we're looking for. So
This is Jill. Send in the clowns.
That one I know.
It's Bon Jovi, Shot in the Dark. It's Bon Jovi.
Oh, okay.
But
Send in the Clowns.
Send in the Clowns. Stephen Sondheim, right? Great. He's the composer. So let's try this. Let's just try. We'll try this. Yeah, there we go.
All right, the first
How
one.
about Frank Sinatra? Frank Sinatra.
Yes. I can name that.
All right.
I'm gonna do, I'm gonna sing it a cappella, because I think we have the free version of that, and it's not working very well. It's only giving me a piece of it. So, Send in the Clowns. Here we go.
Okay, ready, set, go.
Isn't it rich? Isn't it queer? Me here at last on the ground, you in midair. But where are we now? Send in the clouds. What a surprise! What a... And that's all I know. All right, you get the point. Let's try another one. All right? Another sort of song like that. Anyone else?
One more.
One more.
Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi.
Oh, look halfway there. Oh, living on a prayer. That's not really my genre, but thank you. I appreciate the sentiment. Next song, yes.
No, just giving you the next line.
I appreciate it. Next song, yes. We'll try one more. One more. Anyone else?
One Love by Bob Marley.
He wasn't here for your.
I wasn't here, I was washing the wings off my hands, so.
One Love, I sort of know it, but not great. And our karaoke machine's broken, as you saw. So let's try one more. Yes.
So we're not gonna take it.
We're not going to take
My way. My way.
My way.
Yes, perfect.
Now, the end is near, so I face the final curtain. My friends, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full and traveled deep in every highway. Oh no, not me, I did it my way. There we go. All right. We're on a little bit of a cusp. I keep saying one more, but let's try one more. One more. One more. One more. One more. A song from the Great American Songbook tradition. Anybody? A song with a discernible melody, lyrics you can understand. I sound like a 9-year-old man.
I don't know, Strangers in the Night?
Strangers in the night, like exchanging glances, strangers in the night. Now, it's interesting that it would be strangers in the night regarding IDA consultation meetings. I'm not sure how that goes, but okay. So the point is, and the point of this exercise, and for Philadelphia tomorrow, we'll get our karaoke machine functioning so that it functions well. We're having some technological faux pas here, aren't we, today? But that's all right. The point of this exercise is, in some ways, in a fun way, hopefully, like Living on a Prayer, for example, or Strangers in the Night, or any of the other songs that could be suggested, is to sort of demonstrate that consultation ain't quite working the way it should, right? And we've said that before lunch, we're going to say it again after lunch, and we're going to now proceed into talking with you about that all-important pillar known as consultation. But before we get to consultation, I just want to talk with you about the second pillar, proportionate share. And again, all of these pillars have to function together if IDA is going to work well, right? And so let's now talk about proportionate share. And to be clear what proportionate share is the amount of federal, that is IDA funding, that's available to support students with disabilities who are permanently placed in your private schools. So again, this is all about equitable participation. And the proportionate share amount is based precisely on the number of students who have been tested and identified or have been found eligible. And that eligibility number is what goes into the proportionate share formula, which I'll unpack in just a moment. Proportionate share has nothing to do with the kids or the students who are served. All that the proportionate share count pertains to are those students who have been tested and found eligible. Which is why it's really important that even if a kid is not served, that student is still counted in the proportionate share account. And what I want to do to unpack this a little bit, well, let's first ask the question, do you know the proportionate share? This is a good question. Let me just randomly spot check. How many of you know the proportionate share for the private schools within your LEA or IU?
Ish.
Ish.
That's where I got stuck in the survey, because I asked them for the exact,
Yep.
but, I think we have about 20,000, but we share that with several private schools.
Mm-hmm.
They give us an amount based on the total number, so we use it for PD pretty much.
Yes, and that's a good point you're raising, because in an LEA or an IU wherein there's more than one private school, which is, I would assume, all the IUs the case, and certainly in some of the LEAs, the proportionate share is based on the total universe of private school kids within that IU or LEA. So, in the case where you're in an IU or an LEA wherein there may be multiple private schools in addition to yours, it's strategically important, I think, if not practically important, right, to ensure that you're communicating with your respective colleagues in advance of the consultation meeting so that you have a sense, at least, of what the count should be. And then during consultation, this is where consultation becomes so important, right? You're going to discuss with the LEA or the IU or whomever the representatives thereof are to figure out how did they base the proportionate share amount on the numbers that they have. What are those numbers? And it's really during consultation that inconsistencies and inaccuracies are addressed. And so I wanted to sort of use this as an example. By the way, this is the numbers from a place here in Pennsylvania called Anytown, Pennsylvania. It's a wonderful spot. If you've never been there, I highly recommend it. So here in Anytown, Pennsylvania, or Anytown LEA, or Anytown IU, in this particular example, we have, or sample school district, we have the number of eligible students, public and private is 300 in this example. The number of private school kids of that 300 in this example is 20. So then what we do is we add up these two numbers. The aggregate number for both public school kids and private school kids is 320. That's why this count is so important. You're just going to see formulaically, this 20 is really important to this number, which is really important to this number. So proceeding down, it's a pretty easy, even for a mathematically stunted person such as myself, it's a pretty easy thing to figure out. So based on this number, there's a formula that we're not going to get into that generates this amount of IDEA dollars in total. So this is the total IDEA Part B allocation that comes from the feds to the IUs and then ultimately somehow to the LEAs. But the point is, this count here generates this number here. It's not arbitrary. It's based on a formula. And then we look at further mathematics to come to the private school proportionate share. So the per student allocation is found by dividing row D by the total number of students, which is this, so that we're getting a number in this particular example of around $1,300 per student. Now I will tell you that throughout the country, the average per pupil allocation, it's called the PPA, the per pupil allocation for IDA, is roughly around 1,700. So we're actually purposely using a little bit of a lower number just to demonstrate the point that this count is really important. Just know that the 1377 is closer to nationally around 1,700. Be that as it may, we then multiply that number by the PPA, by this number, which is the number of kids. This is again why this number is so important, folks, right? Because by multiplying this by this, we get our total private school or non-public school proportionate share allocation. And this number, of course, drives the amount of money with which you have to work to provide to your students IDA services. And this now again comes into why consultation is so utterly important. We're going to get into it in just a moment. When you go to your consultation meeting, you need to make sure that obviously the data that was utilized to generate the proportionate share number is based on an appropriate count. And oftentimes there is wide discrepancy between the count that the LEA or the IU has versus the count that the private schools have. And so this number, coupled with everything else, generates the IDA proportionate share. And clearly, folks, as a pillar, it's important that this number get right.
And remember, nothing comes off the top of that for testing, because testing would be separate. It's part of the overall IDEA allocation. So that is really supposed to go directly to private schools, and no administrative costs can be taken out of it either.
Great point, thank you for reminding me that, that's entirely true. This number cannot be utilized for administrative costs for the all right, so that's really important. Now, when we look at the data from the survey, question 30, has your LEA or IU conveyed to you, now you kind of have a sense, right, 20,000 or so you said? But how many, I mean, based on the question I previously asked, not a lot of you seem to know this number. Maybe you know it, but it's not on the top of your head, that's fine. The point being, how many of your LEAs or IUs have actually conveyed to you this number in the clearest of terms? The survey data is pretty, well, it says Houston, we have a problem, right? Because according to the survey data, 121 schools, that's like 75% of the total survey respondents, indicated that the proportionate share for IDA has not been clearly indicated. So let me ask you this question, it's rhetorical. If you don't know how much money you have to work with, then how possibly can you go to a consultation meeting that's timely and meaningful? It's like walking into a supermarket when you're 12 years old, I have my allowance, but not knowing how much money I have in my pocket to spend. It's the same concept, obviously, right? I'm not saying that's difficult. The point is, it's important to know the proportionate share amount so that you know how much money you have to work with, so that you can then plan accordingly in consultation with the IU or the LEA. And as you're seeing here with this data point, unfortunately, at least here in Pennsylvania, and by the way, this is notable throughout the country, this is not happening. Our next survey question, from the survey itself, how were students in your school counted for the purpose of generating proportionate share? And what I would just like to bring out here is the notable data point, that about 80 schools did not know how the proportionate share was calculated, which suggests to me, among other things, that there is a wide discrepancy possible, and probably likely, between, once again, the count that the private schools in any given LEA or IU have versus the count that the public school or IU has. And it's important during consultation to ensure that those numbers are reconciled, because it's so important, as I've demonstrated already, to the actual formula for the calculation of the proportionate share amount. And then last, for survey questions that kind of convey some of this, question 34, was there any carryover? Carryover is allowed. In fact, it's not only allowed, it's required. So if you have funds from, let's say, this past year that weren't spent, they must be carried over. This is, again, a consultation topic. You can ask your LEA or your IU, what about carryover? How much is left? Now, they're going to know. And if they don't know, that's another issue. But they're going to know. Just know that that carryover amount, according to the IDA law, is an amount with which you also have to work. And we have here in the survey that 107 schools of the 170, so a pretty large number of them, the districts in which these schools are located, the IUs in which these schools are located, there was no carryover happening. So think about all those literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars that are being left on the table. Again, this is a knowledge is power moment, and so just as long as you're aware that this is the type of thing that you be consulted upon and with, that's the important point. And that grants me a nice segue into our third and final pillar, which is consultation itself. And I'm going to hand the mic back to Julie now to take this for us.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Okay, we touched on a lot of the points related to consultation already, but we're going to just dive in a little bit more here. Go to the next slide. So, consultation is sometimes confused with consultative services, which is a service that's provided to some students who are eligible, through IDEA. So, but this is separate. This is consultation. This is the meeting that should happen with private school representatives and perhaps representatives of parents of students who are eligible. And it should not be just happening once a year. I mean, bare minimum once a year. It should be ongoing. So I'll tell you what it looked like in my experience. In my experience with San Diego Unified, it was never. We never met, we never talked about it, I never got the proportionate share. And then I started to ask questions, and then it became a once a year Zoom meeting. And they would say, here's all the information, do you have any questions? And now what it looks like after just a year and a half of working together, we meet every other week to review the child find count, and just very briefly, I just check in with them, and I just, again, when I say meet, I should say it's like an email or a quick Zoom, check in to make sure I have all of the students who are eligible, and we talk about who's receiving services and the status of those services. So even though I'm no longer with the diocese, they've contracted with ADAC, so I still continue to do that. So it's ongoing. So we're looking at who's eligible, we're looking at what services they're receiving, and it's a very quick, it's just ongoing, and I've got a spreadsheet, and I manage all of the schools who are receiving those services. So ideally, that should be happening, where it should be constant communication of who's getting which services and what your child count is. Now that might seem excessive, but also remember, this is for 25 schools within that district. It's not just for your one school. So your one school wouldn't require nearly as much consultation perhaps. All right, next slide, please. And what we also see in a number of districts is they'll make an offer, and this was happening in San Diego Unified as well. They said, okay, what we'll provide is, I think it was 2 hours of consultation per eligible student per year. That meant that the teacher of the student who's eligible could consult with someone from the public school district for 2 hours once a year. So when you broke it down, when you looked at the proportionate share, we started asking questions. We said, okay, so that means each hour is over $2,000. Because when you look at the numbers, that was the hourly rate, basically. So knowing that proportionate share helps you to calculate the value of your services. That's why it's important. And so we requested, we said, we would like you to consider direct services on site. And they actually agreed to do so, and then we worked with a third party, and now it's provided on site. So it was a conversation that we had over a few months. So it didn't start off that way, and actually, the relationship that we have now, that the diocese has right now with San Diego Unified, is amazing. And they'll say things like, it's like meeting with family, which seems extreme, but it's true. It started off with like us asking for things that we didn't think we would get, but we just started asking the question, and I think it just became familiar to them, and then they realized, you know, we didn't understand this about the law. So it became that back and forth conversation. All right, and we use this phrase, timely and meaningful. So what would be ineffective would be meeting with the school district in June to talk about services that are beginning in August. Why? Because the district doesn't have time to adequately prep to ensure that that can happen in most cases. So you want to set up a calendar with the district, like when are you going to consult? Maybe pick 3 points in a year. And those are the times you meet to discuss your eligible students, where are students in the process, the eligibility process, who's receiving services. But it's helpful if you're proactive as a private school leader and schedule those ahead of time to make sure that they get on the calendar and that they happen. And you should also be talking about how, where, and by whom these services will be provided. Again, it shouldn't be a unilateral offer. They can't just say you're going to get speech or you're going to get OT. It should be a conversation. And if they disagree with something that you ask for, and this will be on the next slide, they're required to provide it to you in writing. So if they disagree with your request, what you want to do is you want to say, can you please give that to me in writing? And it's not, you know, they'll say, well, I just told you. And so you say, no, I need it in writing for my records. Again, that will just alert them that this is something that you really want to make sure you understand, that you have a record of for your files. So it's also important to have that documentation. The public school district does have the final decision-making authority, but once again, they have to explain to you why they disagree. And it's not going to work for them to say we disagree because we only want to provide speech language. They need an actual reason for not providing it. The other thing you need to do, and they should be asking you for this, is written affirmation. So when you engage in consultation with your district, they need to ask you, they should be asking you for your signature, not just that you were there, but that you want to say, it doesn't just indicate agreement, but merely that the meeting and discussion took place, but must be signed at the conclusion of the meeting or as soon as possible thereafter. But you want to make sure that you're affirming that consultation took place. And it's not necessarily meaning you got what you asked for, it's just meaning that you went through all of the consultation topics, which we'll learn a little bit more about when we get to the checklist. Okay, next slide.
Just one thing to add about this. Don't sign that affirmation form unless you believe that TMC, town meeting for consultation, has occurred. And if they're insistent on you, well, you gotta sign something, and they probably will because they want record of the fact that the consultation meeting occurred, write a note. State, I'm signing this. Don't say I'm signing this under duress, but basically that's what you're saying. I'm signing this, but there are a number of issues that we disagree on that need further consultation. You don't have to list them. I mean, there's only so much.
Or for attendance purposes only. That's what I do.
Or for
Yeah,
attendance
thank you for
purposes
that
only.
clarification. I
Yeah.
forgot to add that.
So-
For attendance purposes only.
And the reason that's important is because in the event, I'm not saying this will happen, but in the event your diocese or the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference or others decide at some point consultation hasn't happened as it should, our proportion share numbers are all messed up, child find is dysfunctional, whatever the cause or causes might be, you do have recourse to file an administrative complaint. And that's really important, and we'll kind of get back to that just at the end. But the administrative complaint, the evidentiary proceeding such as it is, one of those pieces of evidence will be this form. And if on that form, the district shows that you've signed off, guess what? Your leg to stand on because of a complaint goes away. So if you're gonna sign, make sure you sign for attendance purposes only, but make sure that you're indicating next to and under that signature that you're signing, but there are issues on which you don't agree.
One of the issues we have in this state, is like the title programs. We go through the grant system, we know exactly to the penny what we have. So we can keep track of that, we do consultation on a continuous basis out of our office with, 52 school districts or something like that, across the diocese. So we knew down to the penny what was spent, what it was spent for. We have a lot of control over those monies. When it comes to the IU side of this, you can give us that number and they give it to us in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We'll be meeting with the IU. And what you had a couple slides back, we're gonna see that. We're gonna see those numbers exactly. But the accountability ends that day. We don't see how much they spend. We don't see where it was spent to. Like you said, are we doing carryover? We have no clue. Technically, and Barbara and I were just talking about this, we know we're not getting enough money.
Right.
We're probably running out by the end
And
of
you
the
can
year.
ask for
so
an
there is no
accountant of that.
carryover.
Yeah, you're entitled
But
to.
there is no accountability, and they won't show us anything. Like if there was $1,000 stuff, we have no way of knowing it. Whereas in the other system, we know right down to the penny what's there. And they'll tell us, they'll come March, and they'll say, you've got, $3,297.16, you have to spend it by. And we go to our schools and we get it spent by that. That's not happening on the IU side. We don't see any documentation outside of that form you just had up a couple slides ago. That's it.
That's helpful.
And that's where our problem comes in. We don't know if there's money left. We don't know what's happening with the rest of that money, or if we ran out in January. Well, they'll tell us that. If we run out in January, they'll tell us that.
They won't forget.
They won't tell us what's left. So that's a big issue.
I have a great answer. That's something else that we're putting together, we're gonna present to the state. Ohio has a really great system they have for their federal programs. All their title programs, IDEA, any state programs they have. I can show you later the link that I have, but it lists everything down to the penny. And if you click on it, it can go into what was spent, how it was spent, what schools spent, what schools received funds. It does it at the diocesan level, it also does it at school level. So a school administrator could go on and say, hey, I had Title II dollars, how much more do I have left? And go on right there. If I have textbook funding, how much more do I have left? Right there. Or any other funding you want to. And that's up to the diocese what you want, the schools to see, but they have a program. I'm gonna suggest that program to the state because one of my colleagues showed it to me, and I really liked it because how can you go shopping without having, know how much you have? You can't. So that makes sense to me. I'm gonna show it to the committee members and get you guys approval, and then I'm gonna show it to PDE and ask them if they could, model what Ohio is.
A lot of times, it's not just what you mean, we can request something if we wanted it, but it goes then, whoever wants this box of books or that box of books. So they're not asking us specifically, what do you want? It's more of a general, and depending on how many schools of us are there, plus how many, other non-pub schools, it changes.
It changes things, yes, I understand.
But still, we can see that in E-grants. I can see what every
Yeah.
non-public school in the area is pulling out of that pot.
Right.
And I also know what our pot is, but on the IU side,
Yeah.
we see nothing except that one.
And I ask for spend out reports, and we get that, and we also do FOIA requests, so Freedom of Information Act, where they're required, so we'll submit a FOIA request and then get that data. If they either don't wanna share, or some will just say that's the process we have, is to submit a FOIA request. Very simple.
I used to have one IU that would give me, I mean, he would sit with me for an hour and go over everything. And then he retired, and so nobody's done that since.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work, it was a lot of preparation, but I knew at that point that's my thing. But that hasn't happened in a long time.
Well, hopefully with all this is going, we're gonna have a new system.
Yeah, we're hoping to standardize a lot of this, and so all of this information you're giving us, like I said, is very helpful. But you do, in the interim too, you can ask these questions, and you'll see in the guidance when we go through it, there are requirements. And so it's helpful to know what those are, so that way you can ask for the right things. So we'll be going through that, and I think Tom is gonna go over the data, and then we're gonna get into the guidance.
Yeah, so consultation survey results. Thank you again for this data, it's obviously very helpful and also illustrative of much of what we've been talking about with you today. So question 22, how often on average in any given year have you engaged in IDA-related consultation with your local public school district? The concerning one obviously is this bar down here, right? That's quite a number of schools of the 170, 52 to be precise, who did not consult at all. So what's going on here, right? And again, consultation is so essential because it's really the strength of consultation, but the other pillars, proportionate share calculation and child find, can function or have a chance of functioning well. Our next survey question 26. Has your LEA or IU engaged in timely and meaningful consultation about which services will be provided? So again, we're talking about 3 topics here during consultation, in addition to figuring out other things such as how they calculated proportion share, what the child count was. You're talking about which services will be provided, to which students, and by which means. And I just want to add in here, the by which means question is really important, which we'll get to in just a couple of slides. The by which means question oftentimes is one that's answered in the following way. Well, we don't have people. We don't have staff. We don't even have enough people in our own staff to serve our public school kids, much less your children. Well, we're going to get to that in just a moment, because that's not an excuse. It's a reason, but it's not an excuse. But let's go to question 27. Does your LEA or IU have a blanket rule about which services will provide this year? For example, I'm in consultation or not, and my IU or LEA says, well, this year we're going to provide to St. Mary's school, we're going to provide speech services. Okay, thanks, bye. It's not consultative, right? Consultation is dialogic, it's not monologic. And again, I know we sound like we keep repeating ourselves, but this is why consultation becomes so important, because they cannot make a unilateral offer of service. That violates federal law. They have to consult, and just say they have to dialogue with you. And then I kind of alluded to this already. Which students will receive services? Again, we're talking group entitlement here, right? Kids in private schools do not have FAPE, they don't have an individual entitlement, they have a group entitlement. So it's really important that you discuss which students will be served. Which students will be served. Because here's the thing, not every kid's gonna get every need met. That's just the way it is. There's limited funds. So it's really important from a strategic standpoint, even as a school leader, private school leader, to really figure out which students will receive services, and how can the IDA funding and the services that IDA funding provides, how can that be covered by IDA? How can some of the services that are required by Act 89 be covered by Act 89? And what's a third funding resource, other than tuition, of course? Philanthropy. So think about this. As a school leader, I assume many of you, or some of you at least, are involved in fundraising. And when it comes, and I'm not talking about chocolate sales, although those things are wonderful. I'm talking about major gift development. What major donors want to see is that private schools are actually well stewarding the publicly available resources to them. If you go to a donor and say, hey, listen, we're maximizing our Act 89 participation, we're really hitting it home with IDA, we're really strategically investing and utilizing the title programs, and here's how else, Mr. Smith, you can help us. Well, that's also going to help you to show, among other things, savviness and sort of a strength that's under the school's hood, if you will, that will hopefully enable your major donors at least to consider how else they can be generous. And then the final question is where services can be provided. Now, to be very clear, IDA allows services obviously to be provided on site, and in most cases, obviously, that's the providing services on site, right, is the least educationally restrictive environment, right? And so certainly services can be provided on site. But again, if the LEA or the IU is going to tell you they can't be provided on site, they need to tell you why. And they need to tell you why during consultation. And if you disagree with their reason or reasoning, then once again, you're going to indicate that by not signing the form or by stating on the form that there are issues with which you disagree. That was what we did after lunch. And let me just ask, what the heck, right? Let's just ask, are there any other songs come to mind? But now that you know a little bit more about consultation, what consultation is supposed to provide. Yes, I see some smiling over there, this is good. Any other songs come to mind? Yes?
Will It Go Round in Circles by Billy Preston. Will it go round in circles?
Why don't you sing it for us?
That's all I know.
Yeah. Come on, Jack. Come on, Jack.
I don't sing unless somebody's paying the cover charge.
All right. Good. All right, lunch break we already had. So we're a little off kilter here. And now we're going to move in. So pretend we just had lunch. In fact, you did. We're going to now move to next steps with regard to the guidance. Julie, take it over.
Okay, now we're going to dive into the document that actually can be really helpful to you for all of your work with IDEA and just for understanding the law and ensuring that you have the appropriate documentation. It's one thing to say, I know could you please provide this in writing? I know you're required to, but it's another thing to say, here's where it says it in the guidance. So in February 2022, US DOE released some very helpful Q&A guidance that is in your shared folder. And really, all of the topics that we discussed today are answered in this guidance, which is very straightforward. So we'll often reference it when we get questions from the field because there are little nuances, so it's helpful to just have this available to you. You can pull it out. The questions are organized by topic. And when you look here, you'll see that there's an introduction and then the table of contents. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the table of contents, and you could do this either in small groups, you could do it individually, and find a topic you'd like to learn more about, or pretend you'd like to learn more about, because I know this is a lot, it's been heavy, but maybe there was some confusion regarding child find or consultation or proportionate share. You can dive in a little bit deeper. So identify a topic you'd like to learn more about. And with your table or small group, after you've had a chance to review it, you could use a discussion protocol. So I used to think, now I think. Or a golden line protocol. So highlight something that raises questions for you or speaks to something you already have experience with. So choose several golden lines to share with the group. You might see teachers doing this in their classes. So it's a similar type protocol we're using because it's a very technical document. It's not necessarily the most interesting, but it provides you with specific answers to your questions. Or you can independently read and highlight anything that will support you with the next steps of accessing IDEA services. So we're just going to spend about, I'll say, 10 minutes with that, and then we're going to get into our review game. So again, choose a topic to focus on, read it. You could read it independently or with your small group, determine a topic, and then choose I used to think, now I think, or the golden line protocol, and just take turns kind of sharing your reflections. All right, and we will have about 10 minutes for this.
And you all have access to the guidance, right?
Yes, go back to the Google folder. We can put it back up if you'd like. It is a lot of pages, so we didn't print it out.
Yeah.
Can you go ahead? Does anyone still need it's the bit.ly? You got it? Okay.
If anybody needs anybody else need
Yes.
your own? Okay, I can try to
I
find
have it on my
it.
phone, but it didn't work correctly.
And I'll just set the old-fashioned timer.
Yeah, good idea.
You always bring backup.
I did.
I have it on my phone, but I can't read it.
It was really early on.
Like, I can. I've been opening my phone and then read it on my phone.
Yes. Slides later. Yeah. Anyone still need this slide up? Go back to the prompts, the directions. Yeah, we're putting the question back at word prompt.
QR codes work well when they work, right?
Yes, there you go.
So, I have a question.
Sure.
So it seems like from these conversations, what we talk about sometimes it's when it's district-wide, is that, or sometimes it's when you think about like area as the IU.
Yeah. We also have responsibility at the federal level, based on district registration. So sometimes the IU is that administrative responsibility for the LEA, for the administrative authority of the IU. So I think one of the first questions we're gonna ask is,
See? So, okay, so this is what, we're going to a meeting, we have it every May.
Okay.
So I have the top line part, you know, when we go to this meeting, this is our consultation.
okay,
We go, we get invited, and they go through all of this with us, says Q has all of this in there. This is an old one.
okay.
This is an old one. So let's say they come to us and then we sign off from home.
Yeah,
This is what we have coming up every week, and then we don't see it, and we don't get those numbers, we don't get those numbers before this meeting either.
Can you share that with me? Okay.
So then at that point, I'm just gonna share it with you.
Yeah. You know, I'm sure it's a whiteboard. I have a business administrator stop card. But could I write down my email address?
Yeah, we can write it right
Yeah,
there.
thank you. It'd be helpful to go through that because there's often a lot of information.
Bridges have been.
Okay.
And I understand if they're mad.
So the children that are ages 3 to 5 are eligible twice for 2 different grants, 6, 11, and 17, so that's additional money if you're PK through 8.
Cool.
Total number of eligible children. Okay, thank you. Makes sense. 9,000 students. Oh, it's 165, okay, so they put the public school number first, so it's only 165.
Yeah, say yes.
That's not right. So your number, your number should be at least, looking at that ratio, I mean.
But look, this is, I wanted to show this. So this is the letter we got, well, this is the letter we get, here we go, asking us to come to consultation.
Yeah.
This is the child find part that we find out every year. Okay, so we have to put in the evaluation, and been completed by the IU for the school district. And mine are always schools, they're never, they go on. So this is our child find.
So the other one is here.
You can't.
And how old is this? Like the annual reporting. Yeah, the annual reporting.
Mine are 22.
Honestly, a lot of that information is inaccurate, and then with that, so I don't know what the actual.
Well,
And it doesn't allow for, well, like you said, your goal is to get parents to get the evaluation done by the year.
I've explained it.
Because otherwise you can't become part of the.
But at the same time, actually, they're like 23.
And then you self-report the eligibility.
But so then, this is the letter, this is what we've asked, so I come to that meeting. And it says here.
I know the one that, they're really close. They never find it.
They, through the parent request, which will typically come to the
Same things, same time going on. Typically that was.
Parent may request an evaluation from their local school district of residence without going to So they're saying the evaluation should come from their district of residence, but we thought it said.
It is, it's in the school's open.
So that's wrong.
Unless it has some sort of formal agreement, but it needs to be.
It's nice.
They can't just say sometimes, but they're different, again, they're different purposes. Because the funding really.
I know. I know, it's like you're in your own little.
So school districts could have.
World. It is not.
They could, but I would ask that in our application, say you went to training, you have some culture, and I think start asking questions, that's really, that's where you start to ask them.
They're gonna be surprised.
They are, and like I said,
One
it's
school
so very friendly, you're
employed
advocating
by
for
Concord School District.
you want to ensure the funds
Yeah,
are
we just get
for
this
advocacy.
piece, and we can disregard it, if it comes in.
Ahead of this
Yeah.
meeting, so that we can come in.
You know what I would do too? I would share that February 2022 guidance with them and just say we just had a training and this document shared with us, we'd like to ask some follow-up questions because we want to.
Yeah, they're probably on the QA.
Yeah, QA, because it's something that's not aware of that and that's federal guidance, so. Interesting. So something we do too, and we can do part of this, is sometimes we go to different governments, we attend consultation meetings to the last president.
In the invite we got for the one day, they said that you can't attend because like some of us.
The lady was gonna squeeze it in, it was late by
Exactly,
the
so
time.
we often attend them, so I attend, try to get the short meetings, we'll just start off by asking some very simple questions.
She thought getting cane mobility.
Yeah, so that's something that we could do too.
Once we came.
Because we really, it's
Hey, we had to talk about it.
like we should
I gave it enough.
This is for us, this is general.
And she went,
Yeah.
Typically, the Catholic schools are the ones who take advantage of this program too.
Hey,
Like,
sure.
it's the Catholic schools.
I taught a student.
Because the other private schools didn't engage. And a lot of the private schools aren't financial situations, they just like, oh, we don't want to deal with any federal program. Whereas our Catholic schools have to be good stewards and we want to make sure we're getting every dollar. So, that was helpful, thank you. Thank you. 5 seconds. Okay. I heard a couple of great questions and great conversations coming up, so I'd like to highlight some of those just before we transition into our games. Again, prizes. So with this group, care to share something that we just talked about with regarding an upcoming consultation? Sorry to put you. Do you want me to share on your behalf, or?
Well, we have a meeting once a year. It's
Yeah.
coming up in May.
Mhm.
So, I think we were just talking about, should we share these questions and concerns ahead of time, or should we wait until that meeting?
Mhm.
And that should really be a decision made by our office, just so that we're all kind of presenting the same information, those of us in the same IU.
Mhm.
But we are only having one meeting a year, but I guess maybe a good idea might be to, again, at the diocesan level, maybe just request an extra meeting just to say, based on this new information, which is what you told us, based
Right.
on this new information, we wanna have some more conversations, so.
Exactly. And I was sharing too, it could be helpful, and I've done this before, is share the February 2022, the Q&A with the district and just say, oh wait, I was just at a training. Again, we're good partners. I was just at a training, I got this document, there were some topics discussed, I just wanna make sure I understand everything. And just give it to them ahead of time. We don't wanna catch anyone off guard, it's not about I gotcha, it's about just ensuring that you can have a meaningful conversation. Yes?
Clarify the funds, so the IDA funds are coming from Identified Child Find,
Correct,
from the federal government.
correct,
Act 89 funds are coming from the state.
correct.
And based on what?
There's a state formula, and I don't know if we put it up.
Your PNPs.
Okay, the PNP, okay. Okay. Just curious. I know which one you mean.
And the thing to keep in mind, you raised a good point, you talked a little bit offline. Keep in mind that money's fungible, right? But keep in mind that Act 89 and IDA obviously are two separate funding resources. And as a result, when it comes to your meetings with your IUs or LEAs, they are duty bound to tell you about the details of the Act 89 funding, the IDA funding, and the title funding. And as I was saying to your group over there, it's related to title programs in particular, what we sometimes see as well happening with districts is that the consultation meeting for Title I is oftentimes conflated with the IDA consultation meeting. It should not be. Now, you should have two separate meetings for IDA and for the title programs. In addition to probably the Act 89 stuff here in Pennsylvania. So really, there's gonna be three different meetings. Now, practically speaking, if your district or IU wanna get together in one fell swoop and deal with all these things all at once, fine. But make sure there's three separate agendas, and make sure that every meeting, within that one meeting, the data and the understanding and the conversation and the assessment and all that is happening separately. Don't conflate federal and state funding or federal and federal funding. These things should be distinguished during the consultation meetings themselves.
Yes, and I did see on one of the IU websites too, it talked about IDEA funding in Title IIA in the same paragraph. And so, really, they need to be teased out. So you can know exactly how much money you're working with, what services are provided, and the consultation calendar for those.
And the other thing we saw from the group over there in the corner, right, is that, remember, Act 89, and Ariella said this at the beginning, Act 89 is considered more a supplement for Title I. Act 89 should not be collided with IDA, which Act 89 is not fundamentally and essentially special education. It touches special education, but remember, Act 89, consider Act 89 supplementary to Title I. That's the way to think about it, as opposed to thinking of Act 89 as in service to special ed. IDA is in service to special ed, which again goes back to why it's so important to keep these separate.
Okay, anything else before we move on? All right, great discussions. We are going to transition to our game. I don't know if you've used quizzes. Very easy.
All right, is this wood? I'm gonna knock on whatever this is, that this will work, because we've had some technological issues, but we'll hopefully, this will work, right?
Okay, it will work.
This
It
is
will
gonna work, all right.
All right, so what will come up next is a QR code and a bit.ly, and all you have to do is either do the QR code or type in the bit.ly, and you can play the game. You could do it by yourself if you wanted, you could do it with a partner, but there's only one prize for first, one prize for second, one prize for third. So, I'm going to pull up quizzes, and basically this is a review of IDEA. We didn't include Act 89, just IDEA, so I know some of you have been studying that guidance. All right. Hold on. Hold on.
We're getting there, hopefully.
It's really small.
Technology's great till it don't work, okay? Ugh.
Okay. So you're going to see a QR code come up, and join my quiz. You don't have to use your real name if you don't feel comfortable.
And the QR code?
Oh, sorry, it's not a QR code, it's a joinmyquiz.com/pro and enter those numbers 450820.
So joinmyquiz.com/pro. You see what you really can't see.
It's very small.
Yeah, joinmyquiz.com/pro, P-R-O. And then once you go to that URL, joinmyquiz.com/PRO, pro, enter 450820.
And once you're joined, I should see your number pop up here.
What was the number again?
450820.
Is there a blank? Is that?
So
Oh, there we go.
There we go, we're getting people.
Yep.
Good. So once again, the URL, joinmyquiz.com/pro with code 450820. Excellent, we're all coming in, this is great. Anybody having difficulty getting in? Cool.
All right, we got 16. Anyone else still trying to get on? All right, we're ready to go? All right, so you earn points for being quick and accurate, just in case you are concerned about your points, but if not, it's just hopefully a helpful review of some of the concepts we discussed today. And all of this is pulled directly from the guidance and the content of our slides today.
Should we start?
We can start.
All right.
Here we go.
You guys ready? All right, here we go.
Hopefully you can read it on your phone too, because I know a little's blocked.
What is the responsibility of the LEA where private schools are located regarding child files? That's the first question. And on your phone, pick your answer. In 10 seconds.
Nice. It's for identifying, locating, and evaluating children with suspected disabilities. AA, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is in the lead. All right, pseudonym, obviously. Here we go. Next question. Question number 2.
Can an LEA require private schools to implement an RTI process before evaluating one of your students? 2 options, yes or no. Ten seconds.
Ours is just spinning.
That's waiting for everyone else.
I want to eat one.
Excellent. Almost 100%. Maybe somebody got stuck too. I know there's one that's stuck again. All right, look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
No, wait, can you pause?
That's okay.
Yeah, you can make it. You're good now? Okay.
Yeah, it had her up
Oh, no.
It's good, we're
Okay.
good.
All right, next question. Question number 3.
Which LEA is responsible for making faith available to your private school students who have or may have a disability?
Tricky one. Okay, and the correct answer is the LEA where the child resides. Again, this is the school district that's responsible for FAPE, not responsible for equitable participation. Okay, that was a tricky one.
Noticing a theme here.
Exactly, and some of it might contradict what you've heard, so understandable.
What is consultation in the context of parentally placed private school children with disabilities? So question fundamentally, what is consultation? Pick your best answer. 15 seconds.
Yes, it's a mandatory process involving discussions between the LEA and private school representatives. All right, way to go, Eric M, RS, and Jill in the lead. All right, next question.
I don't think so.
You put his real name.
What constitutes meaningful consultation according to the IDEA regulations? Fifteen seconds.
One more person? Timely and ongoing discussions throughout the school year. Oh, the top three have not shifted since the last question. Okay, next question. We have a total of 10, and we are on number 6 now.
What are equitable services as applied to private school kids with disabilities? 20 seconds. Ten seconds.
Okay, looks like 2 people didn't get to answer. Equitable services are services provided to parentally placed private school children, and then again, these are with services plans. Wow! Do you happen to go by RS? We wouldn't have known otherwise, so I'm glad you clarified that. I have a cheerleader.
Now, RS, that's you.
She's just sheriff, she's a little
Do
competitive.
you want to come with us to Philadelphia? We've been doing this training. Good job. How are decisions about the services to be provided to eligible parentally placed private school children with disabilities made? How are decisions made regarding services to eligible students? 15 seconds.
So 6 who need to respond. 5. There we go. I think one person might have walked away from
5
the
seconds.
site. After timely and meaningful consultation, we're really bringing that home. Whoa.
City probably won.
She heard mood start me
Okay, number eight.
Must the IDEA funds designated for equitable services be used only for direct services to directly placed private school children? This is a tricky one.
It is, just think of this in terms of IDEA in general. Oh, wow.
right under the wire for us in that one.
Direct services are typically what private schools advocate for because they are shown to have a greater impact than those indirect services. But it can only be made after consultation. So if you go to a consultation and they say, here's what we're providing, that just means they made a unilateral offer without consultation. So again, the public school has the final decision, but it has to be done after consultation. All right, we had two more.
How often must a services plan be updated? 20 seconds.
So at least once a year.
Think of it like going to confession.
That's you. RS still has a shot. We have one more question. Are your fingers ready?
Can we have a retest?
We really should.
Are you eligible for an accommodation?
Yeah, it's in my IP.
Should the parents of a private school child with a disability have the opportunity to participate in the development of a services plan? 15 seconds.
It will ask for accommodations for the answer.
You are getting extra time right now.
Yeah.
100%. Way to go, everyone. Yes, to the extent appropriate. A parent, remember we talked about co-constructing those goals? So, congratulations to our third place winner, HT.
Do you like
Enjoy
coffee?
your gift card.
I just said we're going for coffee.
Well, now you're paying.
Teach me to do that.
Second place.
Thank you.
Uh-oh, we lost him. Who was second place? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Okay, second place, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
If I know who's in second place, I'll come at you, okay?
Congratulations, and our first place winner.
Was
KM. KM, where are you?
okay.
Congratulations, KM.
Yeah. There's something to wonder over. It's good.
Okay, so hopefully you are able to leave today with more just general foundational knowledge about IDEA, how it works, and how it can also support the other federal programs and state programs that you're receiving access to. We're just going to take a look at one more thing, and that is a consultation resource. So I talked about this document earlier. This is something we created at ADAC. It's a year-long timeline, just looking at it, and within each section there are also hyperlinked templates that you can use right away. So if you're wondering, how do I start this conversation with the IU or the district, it tells you what templates to click on. So you can access templates here, and of course this document and the consultation checklist are in your folder. There's a subfolder within that general folder that has the consultation roadmap with all of the links. What's important here, notice it's broken down to before consultation, during consultation, and then after consultation. We try to simplify some of the language that's expressed in the February 2022 guidance. So again, it would be helpful to say, you know, I just went to this training and here are the topics that I learned we're supposed to be discussing. Could we go through each one of these to make sure I have a good understanding? Okay, and it's a good way just to present it as a good partner. All right, and just taking a look at this information, what we want you to spend a few minutes thinking about too are your next steps. So if you use your note catcher, maybe you've been tracking your next steps. If not, we've got a little chart here. Just, again, maybe have a conversation too with your table mates, small groups. And if you can discuss your short-term goals, midterm goals, and long-term goals, we'll just take about 5 minutes, and then we'll ask a few groups to share out. And then we'll end with our survey and just the link to our resources once more. So we'll spend 5 minutes just talking to your table groups partner about your short-term goals, your midterm goals, and your long-term goals. Understanding that a lot of this might be long-term goals. Okay, we'll take 5 minutes.
You look
familiar.
A Divine Redeemer grad.
Yes.
Well, that
She's
makes
a
it
principal
couple
somewhere else.
years.
2003.
Wow, I taught at Lenape actually a little before that.
I grew up in Katanning.
Okay.
So you
And
two
my main
exchange,
name
you'll
is-
exchange
my name is
information.
Steichner. My dad was on the board at Divine Redeemer
What's his-
for many
oh,
years,
who is-
Dawn Steichner.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah, so my siblings and I went through Divine Redeemer. And because there was no geographically friendly Catholic high school for us to go to, a lot of kids would go to St. Joseph's High School, but most would go to Ford City, Katanning. I went to West Shamokin, that's where I graduated from.
Okay.
So I went to St. Vincent College, which is how you seem familiar to me. Then my husband there, he went to Elk County Catholic. And so now we live in State College. I'm the principal at St. Joe's Catholic Academy there now.
Oh, wow.
And so I was on the board of trustees for a little while, and I taught college history for a long time and did college admissions. So I just love Catholic schools, so I know what I'm good at. I'm just parked at St. Joe's for as long as they'll have me. But I love Divine Redeemer. My parents are parishioners at Christ Prince of Peace.
Oh, okay.
I was there for Easter
And
Sunday.
I actually,
so.
I taught Father Eric, you know, he went to public
Oh
school.
my gosh, small world. He's a couple years older than me, I think. So it's
Yeah.
great. They're very lucky to have him.
Oh, yeah, they
And
usually
all
don't do
the
that.
other like 89 parishes that he's in charge of now. I mean, he's got a
Yeah,
very
he has
full
like
plate, right?
4 or 5, I think.
Yeah.
It's a lot. But he takes that, he's always been that way. He's always been really serious. Well, I was a reading specialist. I am a reading specialist, but I would
Yeah.
read stories to the kids and do literacy stuff. That's how I had him. I wasn't as direct.
Nice.
I planned it.
When my dad was on the parents committee at Divine Redeemer, he said, we gotta end like calling it like homeroom mom, like, you know, all these, he's like, I am the only dad that comes to this, and we need more dads that come to this. He's like,
Yeah.
it's parents, everything is parents, so no one will find that. How long have you been principal?
But this is my second, so I'm a retired public school principal, so this is my second year. But then, you know, John Shaner, he's a Divine Redeemer now. He actually hired me in Armstrong School District. Then he was a principal probably after you, like for a little bit. He was on the board for a long time. But
Small world. It's so good to meet you. I don't have your contact email, be sure to email you, so I'm gonna help in any way I can.
Now, I want to just comment on that. That's a great goal. And just say it nice and loud for everyone to hear. That the May meeting,
Is IDEA / Act 89 consultation meeting for our diocese, well, for all the non-publics in our IU.
right,
And
now,
that's where they want us to sign off what we want to do with that money.
just be forewarned, and I'm saying this to you and just generally to everyone, the officials with whom you'll be meeting probably, or may, I shouldn't say probably, may not know how this is supposed to work out.
Okay, well, let me clarify that. We talked about how before we go to that meeting, we need to have a meeting
Okay,
to go
good.
in, so we know, so we don't.
Right, because, and it's easy for us, you know, and it's, we're human beings, original sin, us versus them, right? It's easy for us, I think, sometimes to sort of, it's us versus them mentality, private versus public. It shouldn't be that way. Oftentimes it becomes that, but sometimes the issue is when you're dealing with LEA or IU officials, they don't know anything more than you do. In fact, they may know less, especially with turnover being what it is. So, in terms of planning for that next meeting, think of yourself as educating the educators, right? In terms of how the law is supposed to work. Because the public school folks may not know, and that, because it's not their job to know. It's our job to know, but it's not necessarily their job. They have enough on their plate, right, dealing with their own kids. We have to sometimes educate the educators to ensure that they know what's going on.
Great, and that's, I love the idea of a pre-consultation meeting too, and I did that in San Diego. We pre-consult, we meet together on Zoom, and then we go to consultation and say, we all would like these services. Okay, it was much more powerful. All right, let's take one more, short, mid, or long-term goal. Or question? Who's private question?
Who pays the salaries for the intermediate?
Oh, it's specific to the intermediate unit, I don't know. That wouldn't.
I don't, Sean, do you know the answer to that question?
What, who pays the salary? It's
For
public
the-
schools,
for the
they're considered a public school, so the LEAs in their area pay for the IUs.
And that's specific to Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, one more goal. One more and then we leave.
I think it all revolves around dialogue. I think it's just general dialogue.
Yeah.
So I think you have to, like they were saying, you have to kind of go within your diocese and see
how you want to, you know, approach everything, and then the dialogue that goes beyond that, you know, into your intermediate units or your LEAs. I think it all revolves around just dialogue, and as Jack had said, it's really to benefit students. Everything is to benefit, everybody has the same goal.
Yeah, we all care about students.
That's it.
Exactly.
Student success.
Love it, it's about relationships, as is most
And that's
in
where the
education.
dialogue helps us
Exactly.
build that, right.
Exactly, thanks, well, excellent. Very good goals, and I think very appropriate, knowing that we do have a ways to go. But think about those short-term goals, and hopefully you're feeling a little bit more confident in your ability to navigate IDEA. The last thing we're going to ask you to do is just whoops.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that I mentioned this earlier. So, you know, I'm fumbling here with my words because I want to be careful what I say. And what I want to say, the nuance I want to say is simply, despite your best efforts, and despite the best efforts of your respective IU and/or LEA leaders, things may not go swimmingly, and you may get pushback. And this is where human nature comes in. You may get even hostility, possibly. Not necessarily, but possibly. Irrespective of what happens or doesn't happen, though, in your next steps, realize that there are administrative complaint procedures that you could, and probably from a fiduciary responsibility, should consider becoming involved in. Now, I'm going to defer to Sean in terms of figuring out, you know, this, if you're going to file, if there's going to be an administrative complaint filed to either the Pennsylvania Department of Education or ultimately to the feds, U.S. Department of Education, you'll want to coordinate that with your diocesan leadership, with the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference and others. But I just want to put up here on the board the fact that ADAC, we've been involved in some of these complaints throughout the country, and we're just showing you, I mean, we made the front page of the Boston Globe for the work that was done in Massachusetts, and then Julie can talk about very briefly, I know it's already been mentioned, the work that was done in San Diego regarding also the complaint process that led to some great things.
Well, we can, ultimately in San Diego, we did not file a complaint.
Because
we worked on our relationship, we worked on consultation. I told you, they said meeting with us is like meeting with family, which is crazy. But it was exciting to get to that point that they actually called us family. So, because we just engaged with them. This was an article in Momentum last spring regarding the success we had in San Diego.
And folks, you ask yourself, why couldn't we just do this ourselves, PCC, or talking with the diocesan folks? We've been trying to figure out how we can straighten this out. Ask your diocesan folks. We go to meetings with the IUs twice a year. PDE comes in, explains great things. They tell the law about all these programs. IUs go home, do what they want. LEAs go home, do what they want. So it's so frustrating. So I really do hope you learned something here, and it gives you some tools that you can ask questions. And if you ever have any questions at all, you can ask first your diocesan folks. We're always there to help as well, and then the ADAC folks. But what ADAC does is gives us credibility. And they're known because they've done this in many other states. So when our state hears that ADAC is involved, they do things, they move. I just got all the IU data that we've been requesting for a couple months today while I was sitting here. And I forwarded that to ADAC because we have the data that they showed you so far was from PDE, their whole data. But we asked for data, when we met with PDE, they said, well, you should actually be getting the data from the IUs as well, because that might show a better picture. So we said, okay, what's the best way to do that? They said, we'll request it for you because we'll get it fastest. I said, okay. I just got it today. So we're going to have other, stuff that's available for you after this. We're going to be talking to PDE, the IUs, and everything else to create a better process for all of us. So that's what these are for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. And thanks for coming, and everybody else for showing up, and this is a great place, and for lunch, and for breakfast, and Thank you. Go
Yes.
UConn.
And I just want to kind of, as we conclude, in lieu of playing the video, because I don't want to, the gremlin, the technology demons are sort of flying around the room, and we're probably not going to get to play the video. So I just want to kind of give the context the video is supposed to set. The context is this: when it comes to Catholic schools and private schools, generally accessing for their students their rightful resources, it's all about, at the end of the day, and we said this in the beginning, it's all about the student. And in particular, when it comes to the student, it's all about keeping in mind that our task as Catholic school educators is, among others, is to ensure that these students of ours with disabilities are reaching and meeting their full potential. And that full potential can be uncovered and unlocked by means of the resources that IDA and Act 89 and the title programs and private dollars can provide. And I like the image of uncovering of full potential to talk about for a moment Michelangelo and the block of marble in which the David sculpture once sat. Michelangelo saw in that block of marble, right? He saw in that block of marble the hidden potential. And I think that's an apt image as we chisel away as educators at the potential that lies hidden beneath. We chisel away at that potential to reveal to the world God's glory in each and every one of our students, right? That's our mission as Catholic schools. So that's the first thing I want to mention. And the second thing I want to mention simply is that if we look at history, in terms of students who would have qualified for IDA services had they been alive when IDA was first founded, the list is amazing. People as famous as Agatha Christie, the great novelist, as household name as Albert Einstein or Thomas Edison, all of these folks had disabilities that would technically have qualified them for service under IDA. Do we at any point in our lives think of Thomas Edison or Albert Einstein or Agatha Christie or any of the number of others famous people throughout our history who had a learning difference, who couldn't succeed or didn't succeed? Of course they did, despite the fact that these laws were in the books. Well, for us as Catholic educators, it's important to make sure we uncover these resources fully so that in the future Albert Einsteins and Agatha Christie's and others that our schools are educating, we can uncover and unlock those resources, which again comes down to my first point, which is unlocking full potential. And that's what this ultimately is about. And IDA is certainly a service that can help you to do just that because of the resources that IDA provides. So I just want to close with that because we began with talking about the student. I think it's important that we end with the student. The laws and the regulations and the distinction between the IUs versus the LEAs versus the SEA versus the feds. All of this is interesting if you're into that sort of thing. I'm kind of a nerd. We're both nerds. We kind of like this stuff. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the kids themselves and unlocking that full potential. I think it's important for us to keep that in mind as we proceed forward. So here you have links to the resources that we've shared. And once again, everything that we've shared, including this PowerPoint, will be available to you. And I also want to convey that what's that?
Yeah, it should be in the folder now, and then you said the survey. Oh, can you go back to the survey?
Yeah.
Could we just also make sure we're doing this again
Oh, I went too
tomorrow in
fast.
Philadelphia? So if you wouldn't mind, so far I think we've got 10 responses. If you wouldn't mind just making sure you fill out that survey, that would be helpful to us as we prepare for tomorrow too.
Please.
And Tom and I have a 5-hour car ride now, so we'll be talking about the survey results and planning for tomorrow, and singing Johnny Mathis along the way, so.
Right.
Yes.
And whatever other music was suggested that I don't know about.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Yes,
Right. Yes, of course.
Twisted Sister.
Yeah.
We good to go on?
We're good now, I think, right? Okay. Oh,
And
wait.
in addition to the resources, do you need to go back one more? In addition to the resources, I'll keep the screen up for 30 seconds. In addition to the resources that we're providing via these links, or the link, also I'm going to, in the next screen, provide to you Julie's email address, my email address, our website. Feel free to reach out to us at any time with any questions you might have. One of the things at ADAC that we value is being responsive. So if you reach out to us with a question, you will hear from us, and we're here to help. We're here to help. And I just want to once again thank Sean and the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference for bringing us together, because without Sean's oversight on this and occasional frustration, I know we're all frustrated sometimes with how convoluted this can be, if it weren't for Sean's support and the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference's support, we wouldn't be having these conversations right now. So I just want to say once again, and give a round of applause to Sean as well.
It's not his fault, it's the Pennsylvania Catholic Education Department, so it's Joanne, and it's Barb, and Karen, it's all them who wanted to go proceed with this. I just brought them an idea.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing that. So, without any further ado, we can just say thank you for being here. There are, again, the email addresses I mentioned, and I suppose we can close with closing prayer, right?
Sure.
Unless there's anything else anybody wants to add. Any additions before we conclude? Before Julie and I get on the road and head towards Philadelphia, listening to Johnny Mathis and looking at your survey results. All right. Well, let us pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Good and gracious Lord, we thank you for this time to be together this afternoon. We ask you to provide to us the insight and the knowledge and the gumption and the zeal to fully pursue for each and every one of our students who are blessings in our lives, the resources that they need to unlock the potential that you, Lord, grant to each of them. And so we conclude our meeting today by offering aloud the prayer that was first offered in honor of the first person who ever believed in Jesus, the Blessed Virgin Mary, as we pray together. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Go in peace. Great to be with all of you today. We look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Remember, these slides are PDF now and in that folder. Thank you.
If there's any high schools in the room, if you want to stick around for a couple minutes, Tom just has a few words. This is for high school folks. Yeah. Not Tom Olson, Tom Smith.
I mean, I can stay. I don't know.
Thank you. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Sure.
Hang in.
Bluebell, PA.
She never works on her birthday.